spins the little wheel, and now it tells us we're live. Hello, everybody, or anybody. Hello. And Kev's here too. Hello, Kev.
Hello, Angry. How are you?
Good, man. How you doing? And you're choosing not to have your camera on at the moment, which is a completely legitimate choice, and I thoroughly endorse it.
Well, I am. I have not got my face on at this ungodly hour, so there's just a picture of me and Papa George Soros shaking hands in the secret Jew Illuminati, as we do.
Getting some of that sweet, sweet Soros money.
Absolutely, yeah. He definitely pays all of us leftists to do stuff and things, because that's totally not an anti-Semitic conspiracy theory put about by evil twats. No, it's fine.
So who's coming? We've got some of the regulars: Fox of Fate, Nug, Heist, hello. Don't you think the world is really weird? Because in no way, shape, or form, or correct me if you've seen examples that you think contradict this, I don't think right-wingers ever go, oh, I wish that left-wing thing was real. Whereas right-wingers keep saying this shit, and people on the left are like, God, I wish that was real. Wish George Soros was giving us money.
Yeah, they are slightly strange in that I'm actually part of a Facebook group called Conservatives Threatening Us with a Good Time Again, which is literally just like posts of screenshots from like Twitter and Facebook of conservatives saying things that you think like, I wish that were real. That would be awesome. Literally, it's the this is the future liberals want come to life. Yeah.
There was an absolutely full-on don't threaten me with a good time they posted recently. I'm going to see, because I put it on my Facebook feed because I thought, how do they think this is bad? I'm going to see, scroll through a little bit through all my shit posting and see.
Well, the American presidential election or the nomination, the Democratic nomination thing is fascinating in that regard, because even there you've got people who at least nominally aren't conservative, although I would argue they basically are by comparison to anywhere else in the world, who are basically saying, like, oh, Bernie Sanders wants to educate all of the people. Yeah. Why is that a bad thing? When did let's have an educated population and not dying of cancer or something become like a bad thing? When did the saleable position become, let's have stupid people dying younger because they can't afford not to?
Yep. No, I found it by threading through my meme. I'll share it so people can see it if they haven't already. I just have to.
I should probably have the stream up, shouldn't I? Really? Because at the moment I'm just on the thing.
Well, that's up to you. It's the Nazi part.
Well, if you're going to interact with the chat, I should probably.
That'd be good. I mean, like I said, we're going to just kind of warm up with the audience for a while, but once we get going with the bit I want to use for a podcast, won't really interact with the chat that much. But yeah, I think it's showing on the screen now. The actual Nazi cartoonist Stone Toss, he said then, and he's put a hammer and sickle, and now is a whip and a Hitachi wand. And I'm going, so sexual fulfillment is bad now?
Yeah, I'm not just that, but what are they saying? Because like you say, Stone Toss is an out-and-out Nazi. Are they saying communism's good? Because I didn't think that was a thing they believed. But okay, I mean, that's a change, I suppose.
Yeah, I mean, that is full on what they seem to be saying, that, hey, sexual gratification and communism, they're the same. So either you have a horribly repressed view of sexuality, which I assume is what actually is happening with that freak, or you're like, yeah, communism, sex, it's the same.
Well, I don't know about you, but Joseph Stalin's moustache does it for me. So, I don't know. Some of the people might disagree, but you're wrong.
No, that's a good daddy mustache. That one. That is.
That is.
You know,
actually, a little known fact. I popped into my head. I was talking with someone the other day about bi erasure, like the idea of, but you're either in popular culture, you're either gay or you're straight. Like
Yes.
you can't really be bisexual or whatever, or
Yes.
sort of be raised. And the two people that pop into my head immediately share one thing in common, and thankfully it's not the thing that Joseph Stalin's famous for, which would be
Yeah.
murdering lots of people.
Yeah.
That being Freddie Mercury and Stalin were both bisexual,
Yes.
and they both had glorious moustaches.
It's part of the thing, I think.
Almost certainly.
Yeah.
Yes.
But yeah, you notice how the interesting thing with Stalin, with he being a leader of a murderous regime and all that sort of thing. But really, the
I
only
was about to say, be careful with how you finish that sentence.
Yes.
The interesting thing with Stalin is ...
Well, the only thing he really soured is the surname Stalin. Like, I think a lot of people would be a bit iffy about having the surname Stalin, honestly. But no one's that worried about being called Joseph. And the beautiful Stalin mustache we were talking about, no one has qualms about that mustache. And Stalin's hairstyle, no one has qualms about Stalin's hairstyle. But then you look at Hitler. No one wants to be called Adolf. No one wants to be called Hitler. It's very few people who want to do that little mustache. And the same with his hairstyle. Hitler was so bad, he poisoned the hairstyle, the mustache, the first name, and the last name.
True. Still my favourite piece of nonsense with that was a place I used to work at. Woman was pregnant, and so she brought in a book of baby names.
Yes.
And you look through for some silly ones and stuff like Gaylord, obviously.
Yes.
And one of them was Adolf, which was actually in there, and it just simply said of Germanic origin, blah blah blah, not as popular as it once was.
No.
Which is one of the most delightfully understated ways of saying that.
Yeah. Certain societal concepts have made Gaylord a less popular name.
Indeed. But it was there, so it's like with a dictionary. Who doesn't look up the word sex?
Yeah. Yes, definitely. I remember going to a Catholic school that had a really repressed dictionary because it was Catholic, and the definition of some of the rude words we looked up were hilarious. What does it say masturbation is? And it just said self-abuse. And we were puzzling over that. What does that mean?
I don't know, but it sounds a lot more alluring than if they'd actually just explained it.
I mean, a friend had a 19th century dictionary, and it got good. Like, lesbianism was described as, it was like the lurid sexual behavior between two women or something. It was like this person was both disgusted and obviously incredibly turned on by the sexual terms they were defining.
Awesome. It's the way it fucking should be. But I went to a Catholic school as well, but I don't know if the laws are different necessarily, but you can't. Well, they weren't allowed to have weird dictionaries. They had to have normal dictionaries with the words.
Well, I think they claimed this was a normal dictionary, but I don't think it had been updated since the 50s or 60s, basically.
Oh, well, that's possible then.
Yeah. It wasn't like a Catholic Puritan's dictionary with all the rude bits left out.
Well, I'm sure you probably can get those, though, I imagine.
Oh, without a doubt. I'm sure they exist. I got Musical Aviator asking, do we pronounce Gaylord strange like the Perth suburb of Coburn, which is spelled Cockburn. And I know there's a famous, semi-famous sort of folky type singer, Bruce Coburn. And for years, because I never saw his name written on record sleeves, I thought his name was Bruce Cockburn. But
there's a wine, I know that, called Coburn, which is Cockburn, yeah.
Yeah.
Which, So what would the Galord or something then would be the equivalent?
Galord, yeah, that's the name of Lord's new album, particularly. Mitch is asking, that's a good first question. When is the UK election?
The UK election would be on the 12th of December, because that's a perfectly normal time to have it in the middle of winter.
Oh, yeah. So the government's probably announced on Friday the 13th. Yeah.
Indeed, which will be fun. It's such a strange situation because you're going to have the government assuming the Tories win, which seems likely because the people of Britain are garbage, the Parliament will be sitting again and might actually be sitting over Christmas in order to get this bill through the EU withdrawal bill before the end of January.
Yeah, well, there you go. So I was actually threatening to be really drunk before we even started, which hopefully it is clear that I'm not. Hopefully I'm making some sort of sense. But I did make some drinks today, and they're all green.
Right.
Because my favorite rock candy makers in Pran, they're called the Red Balloon. They do very specialized in-house rock candy, and they did some Christmas things. They're all themed around the Grinch, and they're all different shades of green. So these drinks have all ended up different shades of green, and I've dissolved the different flavors in different beverages and put them in my skull decanters. This is orange melon gin. What else do we have? I've got to try all these because I haven't tried them. This is pine lime tequila. I've got 4 of them in case you're wondering how many of them I have to go through. This is cherry caramel vodka.
Oh, wow, that sounds delightful.
Yeah, it actually does, doesn't it? I'm quite looking forward to trying that one. And this kind of jade-colored one is cola aniseed vodka. So
you are a fan of the exotic cocktails.
Yes, I do like to make cocktails. So I think as we talk, I am going to have to try each of those. And so I predict I'll become more enthusiastic and less coherent as time goes on. So we'll see.
Well, that's fair enough. Well, get drunk by the time the boring bits of me explaining politics and people that no one understands or knows about would be my advice to Australians. I think.
All right. It is Saturday night. It's time to start drinking. So, and also for the benefit of the viewers, the listeners, anywhere down the track, I'm sharing the house with a birthday party for a 17-year-old. So in the next room, there are some 17-year-old lads. So you may get some ambient noise from they now started playing something really loud. So you may get ambient noise coming from them, or they may be mortified by the sort of ambient noise I end up making.
Oh, sorry. I briefly muted my microphone there. I timed the unmuting very badly. Anyway, a birthday party for a 17-year-old. Is the your 17-year-old's birthday? No,
it was Mrs. Angry's son. We're in one of those wonderful blended households. I have 2 kids with a previous partner, and they're both older. And the youngest member of the household is Mrs. Angry's lad. He's turning 17. So in a mere year, everyone in the house will be legal adults. So that's disconcerting, to say the least.
Indeed. But I do have to ask, why aren't you on fire?
I don't know. Oh, okay. I am literally in the least fire-affected part of the country. The south of Victoria is about the only part of the country not on fire. The northern parts of Victoria, country areas are on fire. Fucking all of New South Wales is on fire. Significant portions of Queensland are on fire. I think there's fires in Western Australia. There were fires in Tasmania, South Australia. Northern Territory is all desert, so there's nothing to catch on fire there.
You can't really burn sand.
Yeah. So, yeah. Hey, I've got weird mail. I occasionally get weird mail. And this is all from this person, and they just send me inexplicable shit. They spend $1 Australian on postage, and I often just get dockets. And this one looks like... I normally can handle this with tongs because I never know what's going to be. It looks like a tissue, some chocolate wrappers they've been eating. There was something...
Who is the...
I know. No, I'm not joking.
Is this a fan?
This is someone.
Some fucking... that person definitely has a collection of body parts in their fridge.
Yeah. They've sent me The business card of someone who does finance. Yeah, I know. Something from the Gideons. A business card from the Gideons.
This is an Australian dollar well spent. Whoever.
Yeah, it is, and they do this semi-regularly. Like often, it is chocolate wrappers is not new. I've had chocolate wrappers and gum wrappers before. Shopping dockets is common. So they're special. I love them. So
that is amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Well, people have been asking me to get out like a PO box or whatever.
Yes.
So they can send me stuff. Which I may do at some point in the future, and I do hope people send me like wrappers and things. Yeah, that would be fun.
That's one person. And the other fun thing they do. This is how they address the envelope. They just write it in the top left-hand corner.
Andrew.
Which is, because I didn't tell them my real name. So, yeah. Oh, Mitchell keeps asking us, are the Tories the same as the Australian Liberals? Yes. The Tories are the Conservative Party. Their official name is the Conservative Party, I believe. Tory is a nickname.
Technically, it's the Conservative and Unionist Party.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah, which I'm not even going to get into the unionist element of that because, I mean, talking of archaic, ridiculous, boring, shit, horrible politics, that's a situation that doesn't need to be explained. Just know that it means they sort of want to keep hold of the bit of Ireland we've stolen.
Okay. I thought that Unionists were the Northern Ireland Unionists. Yeah. Okay.
Well, that's basically what it's a reference to. Like the Union is the four nations: England, Scotland, Northern Ireland, and Wales, which make up the United Kingdom. Hence, union of those nations. So, but when referring to unionist in the context of the overall nation, it references the difference between a Republican, which would be, or a nationalist in Northern Ireland, which would be wanting to rejoin the Republic of Ireland, and the Unionists who want to remain a part of Britain, or part of the UK, technically.
So it is correct to say this upcoming election is a UK general election.
Indeed. All of the 650 parliamentary seats are up for grabs across the entirety of the nation. So currently we don't have any members of parliament, which is nice, I suppose. But yeah, so it's across the entirety of the country. But there's a slightly weird situation now where you've got national parliaments like in Wales, or Welsh Assembly, and the Scottish Parliament, which have devolved powers in regards to like healthcare and education and stuff. So a lot of the legislation that passes through the national parliament doesn't necessarily affect certain other parts of the country. So it's like a weird gradient of federalism, if that makes sense for Americans. Not that there would be any Americans watching because it's like the middle of the fucking night in America, but there we go.
I get insomniacs. Every now and then I get North Americans and I'm like, okay, do you work night shift or are you an insomniac? And they tend to be insomniacs. Like I get people who are tuning in at 3 and 4 a.m. their time.
Well, insomnia is how I got into North American sport.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, because it's on at like 2 in the morning and they used to show it all live. And because I notoriously never sleep, I mean, almost never, it's awful. Actually very unhealthy, but, has its upsides, I suppose, in that I get to watch, absurd games that no one else understands or cares about here. So,
oh my God, yes, because one of the times we did a live stream and we were setting up a time, you told me my time, and I looked it up and said, I think you've made a mistake because that's like 3 a.m. your time. And you're like, no, trust me, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, that's fine. Absolutely. Like this, for me, this is an ungodly hour, even though everyone's awake now. Well, most
9 a.m.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Just gone 9 a.m., which is like a normal time that people are awake, albeit not necessarily on a Saturday, but, for me, this is like the middle of the night. It's ridiculous.
I'm going to slightly aside and say, hey, Doc Savage, you gave a very boisterous greeting. There you go. Best wishes to you too, Doc. And I'm going to say to Tiny Boy, you're a dumb, boring, fuck-headed little bigot. Shut the fuck up or fuck the fuck off. Hey, I've had enough to drink that I'm boisterous and telling someone to fuck off. There you go.
Well, isn't that's? I assume that's just an Australian greeting, isn't
it? Yes, kind of. It's like, oh, you can't come over here. Sorry.
Well, I do like that. Nothing will beat Australia can as a phrase, as a national exhortation to pride is a beautiful thing.
Yeah. This is an actual apparent. Well, it's an anecdote, so maybe it's not true. But this will test your sports history knowledge. Are you familiar with the bodyline controversy in Test cricket?
Yes, absolutely, yes.
Okay, and I'm going to briefly divert because this dumb inbred pig fucker tiny boy, when I told him to shut the fuck up, said, or fuck off, he said, no, you don't understand, you dumb fucking cunt. I control whether you fuck off or not. You just control whether or not you shut the fuck up with your brain dead, ignorant, bigoted shit. I actually control whether or not you fuck off. So shut the fuck up or I fuck you the fuck off, you dumb little cunt. Okay. So
I don't remember. I don't think that was a direct quote from Harold Larwood.
No, I can recall. Go back to Harold Larwood because it was a very notorious thing. Okay, Test cricket was a quote unquote gentleman's game in the early 20th century, and Donald Bradman was like the greatest batsman ever, and England was trying to find a way to counter him. And they came up with a very aggressive style of bowling, which today would just be regarded as very normal, but at the time was very confronting because it was fast bowlers bowling straight at the batsman, trying to hit them, essentially, which is normal now. But back then, it was really outrageous. And the Australian public and the Australian cricket team were very upset about this, and they said an outrageous word, like they accused the English team of unsportsmanlike behaviour.
Good.
So that was bad. But the fun bit, I dropped something. I'm just picking it up. The fun bit that I wanted to get to is this. This has been. I've seen this from multiple sources. It's basically. The English captain was upset with how upset the Australian team was, and he'd heard that they'd called him a bastard, and he was upset about this. And he approached the Australian captain and said, wanting to win is all this, that, and the other, but for just saying things like calling me a bastard, that's not on. And the Australian captain went, oh my God, I'm getting to the bottom of this. Come with me. And he walked into the Australian change rooms with the English captain and said, right, which one of you stupid bastards called this bastard a bastard? Which is beautiful.
I'd love that to be true. I'd love it to be true.
I in my heart, it's true.
Yeah, exactly. If you want it to be true, it's true. And plus it happened, fucking 90 years ago. So
yes, it is bordering on ancient history now. So I think we can say whatever we want about it.
Although that's the sort of the beautiful thing, like talking about it as a gentleman's sport and all the rest of it. How different those times were. That imagine an international controversy, and it genuinely was. There were letters exchanged from like official government officials and stuff.
Yeah.
About this, an international controversy over cricket. Yeah. Like it's just, I suppose, well, it might happen between, say, like India and Pakistan, but that's very much about something else. The cricket is sort of incidental, really.
Yes.
Whereas this was an actual on-the-field cricket thing, which became like potentially, not war, but they're part of the empire and all that. Well, technically, I think at that point was active dominion or whatever had been passed, so they were independent, but. Sort of very much under Britain's boot. So there could have been all kinds of ramifications. Good Lord.
Yeah, okay, this is the weird thing, because who plays cricket? Former or current members of the British Empire. Yeah. Why did Canada not play cricket competitively? I've never understood that.
They do, but not to like any particularly high degree, but they
not to a really high professional standard.
No, and often like in America, there are actually cricket leagues, but often it's emigres. It's like in Canada, like former British or Australian expats, basically, and in America, it's largely people from the Caribbean islands who play as the West Indies, which in of itself is redolent of empire and all the rest of it.
Oh yeah.
But anyway,
everyone's former members of the empire. Yeah,
absolutely. But yeah, it's like Caribbean emigres to America that set up their own cricket leagues and things. But yes, so I don't really know. It's like it's a fascinating example if you look at the difference between, say, rugby union and cricket. Which nations took those on? Like India and Pakistan obviously play cricket, but they don't play rugby. They decided no, we don't want to do that one, but we'll do cricket and we'll do like hockey as well, like field hockey as opposed to light hockey. So it's interesting to see culturally which ones were done. Whereas Australia just went, we'll do all of them.
Yes. There's nothing else to do here but play sport, so we will do all of them.
Exactly. Well, yeah, nothing else to do. It seems like a place that's too hot to do sport.
But common sense is not big here.
Well, yeah, I mean, yes.
Oh, look, okay, because I grew up in the country where it was regularly 40 Celsius at Christmas, 100 Fahrenheit for people to do that. And everyone liked to pretend they were English. So on Christmas Day, we would have very English lunches or dinners, and that's roast beef, roast lamb, roast chicken, roast pork. And cooking roasts and roast vegetables when it's already 40 Celsius.
Again, that's how a country sets. That's how a country sets on fire.
Yeah, absolutely. My mum would slave away in the kitchen, and it's like a sauna, and that's regarded as normal. That's not normal.
It's not normal. It's really not normal. Like it makes sense actually in England in December because it's fucking freezing.
Yeah, put the oven on because it's cold.
Yeah, exactly. And not just that, but warm food warms you up. But that's nice. Yeah. Whereas in the middle of those kind of conditions, for a start, even in the height of our summer, it doesn't get that fucking hot because it's just not possible to get that hot here. Yes. We're too far, close to the fucking Norway, for instance. Yeah. No offense, Norway, but you're a cold country. That's the point I'm making. Yes. So it's never like a problem particularly. Whereas, if it's that hot, just have a salad. It's fine. Yeah. I don't think Jesus would be offended.
Yeah, if
that's your issue.
Yeah,
like the turkey dinner on Christmas Day is not mentioned strictly in the Bible. So if that's your issue, not a problem.
No, I think it was people wanting to think they were still part of England, honestly.
Yeah, I think there is a lot of that. There's going back to India and Pakistan, actually, a lot of members of the kind of upper crust of society really do want to think of themselves as essentially as English, because that was one way they could see themselves as above the other people around them, essentially, was during all the days of the Raj in India and things. And obviously that carries on in the kind of class system that still exists in those places. And I imagine there's a certain element of that within Australia as well. Yeah.
I've worked with Indian people who went to the really expensive universities in England, and there's a real more English than the English vibe going on.
Yeah, for those a thing I would advise you to look up as an example of this, but it's actually very, very funny, was from a show called Goodness Gracious Me, which I don't know if that ever aired in Australia.
It did. I love that sketch comedy, and it was like the children of immigrants from the subcontinent who did the comedy for it. Oh God, that was a funny show.
Yeah, absolutely brilliant. People like Meera Syal and Sanjeev Bhaskar and things. Absolutely brilliant from like the 90s, early 2000s. And it was a sort of a satire take-up of racial relations in Britain, but in sketch comedy form, basically. And they had these characters who were, like you say, more English than the English. And they were clearly from the Indian subcontinent, although it was never quite defined where, but it doesn't really matter. And they moved to England and tried to out-English the English. And so the one couple were called the Kapoors, but they changed to the Coopers, for instance. And it was so brilliant. And I will we'll use one racial epithet coming up, but it's actually relevant in the thing, right? It's the piece. There was one scene that was banned. The BBC wouldn't allow them to do it, which is ironic because they say, like, since the introduction of political correctness, you can't get away with these things. But this was before political correctness was really a thing, and they banned it. Whereas now, after political correctness, it seems rather tame. Like that would be allowed on TV. Anyway, it was a scene where they, like I said, they out-English the English. So they go to the Church of England, like a ceremony, and there's a white priest there, and they do it the whole bit back and forth. And he says, "Oh, we've got a visiting priest from somewhere in Africa," and he walks out, and he's a little brown chap, as you would expect, dressed up as a priest, presumably some sort of actor. And they go, "Oh my God, it's a fucking Paki." But it's the brown people saying it to the other brown person because they're pretending to be white.
Yeah.
Whereas, like I say, that's actually a fine example of how political correctness didn't kill comedy, because that was before political correctness and was seen as too taboo. Yes. Whereas now, after political correctness, people are more open about the situation, and that would be a perfectly fine piece of satire, which would be allowed now.
Yeah, I do remember they had a great routine where, like, two Indian couples there in a remote sort of village pub in the middle of nowhere, and they're getting this incredibly negative, clearly racist vibe towards them, which they can't quite understand because they regard themselves as very, very English. So why are all these white English people being iffy towards them? And the tension sort of ratcheting up with the racist vibe, and then a black guy comes in, like, you know, West Indian, and the instant he walks through the door, all the Indians go, "Oh, thank God." That guy, like, he's black. Just, we can all turn on him now.
Britain's a strange place, because even though that's comedy, that's basically the dynamic.
Oh no, it was real. That was clearly real for them. Yeah, absolutely. It was like they were basically doing their parents. In a lot of those sketches, they were doing their parents.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Yeah. There's the guy who thinks that everything's from India.
Yes.
And, the brilliant one about Superman. Basically, his son would bring up a thing. This whole skit was his son would bring up a thing. The dad would say he's from India, even though obviously he wasn't. He was like invented in America or wherever, and then explain in some absurd way how he had a connection to India. And and he said, "Superman's clearly an Indian. In what other country can a man run faster than the trains?" Which is an amazing line and sort of true.
Yes. Anyway. They also had one with a big group of drunk young indie, like 20-something Indians.
Oh, going for an English.
Oh my God, that was a good sketch.
Yeah.
It's just everything about English.
A perfect setup of then. Yeah, the best bit of that, I think, was the. Like you say, it's just they're taking the piss out of going for an Indian, where drunk English people go to an Indian restaurant, behave like utter dickheads, and then leave and act like absolute arseholes to the people. And the one was the waiter, obviously, is a white guy, because the whole point is they're going for an English, and they refuse to pronounce his name properly, which is what obviously these English people do. And his name was James, and he goes James.
They're calling it Hamesh, and and they say things like, "Oh no, I can handle English food. Give me the blandest thing you've got on the menu." It was so good.
Yeah, that's true.
Oh gosh. Okay, I think we've warmed up enough. So for you fine folk in the live chat now, we're going to get hardcore into talking about the UK election, probably, knowing us, a huge number of tangentially or completely unrelated things.
Almost certainly, yes.
Almost certainly. And we're going to do this for like an hour or so, which, besides hopefully entertaining you wonderful people, I'm going to use it for a podcast. And of course, it'll be up on the YouTube channel as well. So we will probably not so much be paying attention to the chat, like saying hi to people who come in and out. but sorry, I got mildly distracted for a second there. So yes, we won't so much be saying hi to people going in and out of the chat. But if someone says something in chat and one of us spot it and it seems something we can run with, we probably will. But yes, so don't think we're rude if we don't pay attention to the chat, because when you use it for a podcast, and it won't necessarily make sense to talk about the chat for people who can't see it.
Indeed, anyone used to watching my stuff will know that I don't care for the chat. So then they'll be used to it. I am rude. I will just ignore you.
That's good. Well, that's what's going to happen for at least an hour or so anyway. Okay, so I'm going to start my little recorder here, and that gives me two alternatives from audio. Got my little Zoom recorder happening. So I'll do a couple seconds silence and then do a podcast intro, and then we're going to go to town. All right. Hi, everyone. Welcome to the podcast. I am joined by the one and only Kev. How are you doing?
I'm very well. How are you, my good sir?
Very good. Kev Logan. Look, we've chatted many times, whether via the social medias or we've done live chats on your channel, on my channel. This is the first time I'm including one of our chats for the podcast because I realized should have done it much sooner, but we're doing it now at least, which is a plus.
Well, I thank you for having me on.
Well, and I have an ulterior motive because I believe you are, in fact, an English person.
It's been alleged. I can neither confirm nor deny. It's an ongoing legal issue. Let's let the lawyers sort it out, you know?
Yeah, no, that makes sense. And I thought it would be good to get you on because while I will shamelessly put very strong opinions out on topics of which I have no first-hand knowledge in, there is in fact a UK election coming up, which has a bit of a pronounced effect on you potentially.
Yes, rather annoyingly so. It's been atrocious. Whilst Australia has been literally on fire, Britain has been metaphorically and spiritually on fire for the last few weeks, with an awful general election, with one of the worst, most despicable campaigns run I've ever seen. The Conservative Party have disgraced themselves in the country with a list of fakery and bullshit as long as you're up. And I made a small list of the ones that I could remember off the top of my head earlier today. And this could go on for a while, but note that this is a small compilation of the fuckery they've been engaged in so far. They doctored a footage of a guy called Keir Starmer, who's the Labour Party Brexit secretary, making it look like he didn't know the answer to a question. Got called out for it. Nothing changed. During the debate between Boris Johnson and Jeremy Corbyn, the leader of the Labour Party, they changed the Conservative Party HQ Twitter account to Fact Check UK and tried to pass themselves off as a fact-checking website, which was obviously fucked up. They put out fake costings of a Labour Party manifesto that hadn't been released yet, so I don't know where that even begins with the level of lying. They've repeatedly accused the Labour Party of being communist or Marxist, completely unfounded. They've spent fucking millions on fake news on places like Facebook and other social media. They've claimed that the Labour Party support open borders. Not true. They bribed Nigel Farage of the Brexit Party with a peerage in order for him to stand down about 70 candidates across the country, which is not just immoral, but highly illegal. Not that anything will happen. They put out yesterday a fake Corbyn tweet about the terrorist attack on London Bridge, which you may have seen, where apparently Corbyn had said that an innocent man had been shot dead on London Bridge. That was completely fake. They've claimed that they're going to introduce 50,000 new nurses, even though 19,000 of them will be retained rather than new nurses. They said they were going to build 40 new hospitals. It's actually 6, and they're refurbishments. He lied about selling the NHS off to the USA through documents that the Labour Party got unredacted. There's the faux moral outrage about largely non-existent anti-Semitism. The fact that slogan is "Get Brexit Done," even though this is literally the start of the Brexit process. And they suppressed a report into Russian interference in the previous general election and the Brexit referendum, whilst at the same time taking millions from Russian oligarchs. So it's no surprise then that the British public, being trash bags, have them miles in the lead.
Yeah, and I've also, speaking of lies, I've also seen some quite credible analysis that says even the companies that are putting out the opinion polls that favour the Tories are essentially not being completely honest or not completely open about where their funding comes from, namely the Tories. And yeah, it does actually seem to be, all politicians are dishonest type of thing. But this does seem really spectacularly egregious in terms of dishonesty.
It's one of the slimiest, sleaziest campaigns you will ever see. It's every underhanded technique they can possibly use they have, and it actually goes back, as everything fucking does in British politics now, to the Brexit referendum of 2016, where a guy called Dominic Cummings, who you may not have heard of, he was Boris Johnson's personal advisor as Prime Minister, and he was previously the head coordinator for the Vote Leave campaign, so the pro-Brexit campaign during the referendum. And they did all manner of illegal, underhanded, sleazy, slimy things and got away with it and were successful ultimately, obviously, in the vote. And again, when evil goes unpunished, it just promotes more evil. And that's precisely what we're seeing now, but on a larger scale, because they've got the backing of A, a major political party, and B, sort of the government behind them, albeit technically government agencies are not supposed to do political campaigning, but they've tried. In fact, actually, thankfully, one government agency, the Treasury, the money people, basically, refused to go along with one thing that the Chancellor Sajid Javid tried to do when he tried to get civil servants during an issue called PERDA, which is basically when a general election is called, civil servants can't do political stuff at all. Right? It's literally like they can't interfere in that way.
Yeah.
And he tried to get them to cost Labour Party policies, and they said, no, that's obviously political, and we can't do that. It's a general election.
Yes.
So they literally tried to do a thing they know is illegal at the very start of the campaign where they're running as the Law and Order Party. Ridiculous.
No one ever gets held to account for this bullshit. Like, Boris Johnson is never held to account for any of the ridiculous shit he says or does. So they're absolutely shameless. It's like, oh, yeah, I'll do a thing that's illegal because no one's ever actually going to hold me accountable for it.
Well, yeah, exactly. The only body that's ever really called him on his shit and had the legal force to be able to do so was the Supreme Court when he tried to prorogue Parliament back in the late summer.
Yes.
When he tried to illegally basically shut Parliament up whilst he did Brexit behind everyone's back, even though it was supposed to be about regaining sovereignty for the British Parliament.
Yes.
And the Supreme Court said, no, that's clearly fucked up, and allowed Parliament to be recalled. But there are very few instances where that's the case. And for that egregious thing of, actually following the law, which is the point of having a fucking Supreme Court, he's threatened an independent, quote unquote, independent commission to oversee potential constitutional change so that you would have more power concentrated in the hands of the executive and not the judicial.
Yeah. There's all kinds of not good. And there's even been little side things like Johnson's clearly trying to dodge any sort of pointed scrutiny, like is refusing various interviews, refusing to show up to a leaders' debate.
Basically he's decided that because he's far enough ahead in the polls, even though, like you say, I think there is definitely some questioning of those polls, and the fact that you had a huge surge in young voters being registered before the end. There was a massive spike because of some youth people, grime artists, rap people anyway here in Britain, had put out a thing saying young people register to vote, and they did in huge numbers, and that's obviously going to sway things. We'll see how that goes. But because Johnson thinks he's far enough ahead in the polls, he's sort of thought to himself that he's got more to lose than to gain by going on and being grilled.
Yeah.
So he's decided not to bother now. So there's a guy called Andrew Neil, who most people on the internet will know from the amazing interview where he basically forced Ben Shapiro to get up and storm off from one particular interview, which was hilarious. But anyway, he had agreed to go on the Andrew Neil show, and Andrew Neil always grills every motherfucker, regardless of what politics you have, like whether you're Ben Shapiro or whether you're Jeremy Corbyn or whatever, anyone in between, he'll grill the fuck out of you. Which is sort of the point of a journalist, really. But anyway, Johnson had agreed to it, so Corbyn agreed to it. That was the whole deal, right? They both were going to do this, but separately, obviously.
Yes.
And Corbyn went ahead and did it, and everyone agreed that he got roasted because that's what the guy does. And Johnson's just like, no, I don't think I'm going to bother now. Again, underhanded, shady, backstabbing nonsense, just so petty and shit. And the man's going to have access to nuclear codes and things. Brilliant.
Yeah.
So that happened. He's refusing to do the Channel 4 debate on the leaders' debate, which, again, underhanded, shady nonsense. They had the amazing spectacle a couple of days ago. They had a climate debate on, again, I think that was Channel 4, where the leaders of several other parties, so Corbyn turned up, and the leader of the Green Party and the Liberal Democrats turned up. But two noted party leaders that didn't turn up were Boris Johnson of the Conservative Party and Nigel Farage of the Brexit Party. And so rather than empty podiuming, that's a word now, they decided to put up ice sculptures and watch them melt as the thing went on. And so you had literally they kind of set the usual semicircle of the leaders at the podiums, and on each extreme end they had like an ice sculpture of the globe with the Conservative Party logo, and it was carved beautifully into ice, absolutely perfect. And another one for the Brexit Party on the other side. And literally, as the debate was going on, these two things just melted. It was an amazing like metaphor. It was beautiful. So that happened, and he's basically. He doesn't want to have any scrutiny because every time he goes on to one of these things, like I say with the claim of 50,000 new nurses, it's not. It's a lie. They're fudged numbers completely. Again, it's very reminiscent, and Dominic Cummings is behind all of this, is very reminiscent of that Brexit referendum because they just would make up numbers like £350 million a week for the NHS plastered onto the side of a bus. Total lie. Not relevant to anything, not the truth, not actionable in any respect whatsoever, but it sounds good and idiots will buy it. And that's essentially what we're seeing now. And when people aren't, like you say, they're never held to account, so it never changes.
Yeah, and I noticed, talk about holding to account. The Tories are now threatening Channel 4 for that ice sculpture stunt. They're saying they're going to review Channel 4's broadcast license because they think that was unreasonable.
Well, what they wanted, which I think is slightly ridiculous because it was a leaders' debate. They had the leaders of the political parties talking about this issue. And Boris Johnson was invited and obviously could have attended. There was nothing he had to do because technically he's still like the Prime Minister. So, like for instance, with the terrorist attack, if the debate had been yesterday night, it's perfectly understandable that he had other shit to do. There was a big national event taking place. Whereas a few nights ago, there wasn't. He could have just turned up to the fucking thing. But he wanted to send one of his ministers. I think it was Michael Gove. It doesn't really matter who. It
was Gove, yeah.
Yeah. But obviously Channel 4 said, well, no. We've invited the leaders. You can't just have like this weird surrogate chap turn up. You either turn up yourself or not. Like maybe if he couldn't have turned up for national security reasons or whatever, maybe they would have accepted a replacement. But you can't just decide, no, I'm not going to bother. I'm going to send someone else. That's ridiculous. But so they're going to. I don't think they're going to review their license, their broadcast license, but it's specifically based on the fact that Channel 4 is a reasonably new organisation because it was set up in the 80s. Still receives some money from the license fee. Which usually all goes to the BBC, but they get a small proportion of it to make them more commercially viable. even though they've been making profits now every year for the last 20 years or something. So they don't really need the money. But clearly this is vindictiveness on behalf of a petty, jumped-up wannabe dictator in Boris Johnson, in that they did a thing that made me look bad, so I'm going to take their money from them. Ridiculous.
Yeah, it's pretty full on. And this is interesting. One of the lies you brought up, and I don't know how much this is being played up in the UK, but for me, if I was the Labour Party, it'd be the thing I would shout day in, day out. Johnson is clearly going to sell off the NHS to American private health insurance companies. Donald Trump has explicitly said, I'm doing a deal with Boris that opens that up to America. It's on record. Everyone knows this is their plan. I'd be saying it every second of every day.
Well, to be fair, they are, and it's getting big play. And interestingly, it's a matter of watch this space to a degree, because guess who's coming to town next week for the NATO summit?
Oh, is Trump coming back?
They're all coming back because the NATO summit is being held in London, just pure happenstance, because the original date for the general election was going to be this Thursday, but because of the NATO summit, they moved it back like another week. Because, the Prime Minister has to do Prime Minister stuff at the NATO conference, so they moved it back a week, which makes a lot of sense. And they always held it on Thursdays. It's weird and archaic, but that's Britain for you, so it happened the following Thursday. So he's in town, and Boris Johnson's already put out press releases and stuff basically saying that he's asked Donald Trump not to interfere in the UK elections. Now, Donald Trump doesn't take orders from anyone, including himself. He doesn't have the capability to hold his tongue. So I think he might just be asked by the British press, do you intend to try and buy the NHS? And Donald Trump, being an idiot, will say yes. And then that you will see that issue fucking explode. Because at the moment, what you have is the Labour Party, as I mentioned in the list of things, got hold of a document which was unredacted. Technically, they shouldn't have had access to this because it was for like government eyes only or whatever. But they got hold of it and thought, fuck this noise, because it clearly shows representatives of the UK government, so trade envoys, in official discussions. This was official minutes and the conclusions to meetings between them and American pharmaceutical companies and members of the US Embassy in London. Right, so official representatives of the American government discussing opening up pharmaceuticals to American companies following Brexit. Because at the moment we buy all of our shit from Europe. It's a lot cheaper because we buy in bulk and all the rest of it. And Boris Johnson said, well, technically that doesn't prove anything. Well, yeah, technically in a court of law, but we can all see exactly what is going on here. And what is going on is that the UK government has given directions to these people to start the negotiations to sell off parts of the NHS and its procurement. Because if that hadn't been the case, when that was brought up by American negotiators, the British negotiators would have said, no, we're not negotiating that. It's not for sale. Take from that what you will, which is they're trying to sell it off. Obviously, please don't vote for these pricks. I lost count the number of thousands and thousands of NHS staff who have literally said, please don't vote Conservative. They're trying to fuck your NHS. And the British people are like, well, we hear what you're saying there, but also taxes. Or also immigrants. So, you know.
I didn't know.
The immigrant thing is actually very funny because the racists will find themselves in a worse situation because when we leave the EU, assuming we do leave the EU, let's hope we don't, but if we do, they'll find it even worse because the immigrants we're getting now are from like Poland and Lithuania, largely white nations. The racists won't like it when all of a sudden 1 million Indians land on our doorstep because those people will not be white.
Yes.
You will definitely notice the difference, you utter twats.
Although I did notice, was it my first trip to the UK? It was many years ago. I did a road trip through a few areas with an English YouTube friend. We started off in Bath and worked our way up to Edinburgh and then back down to London. And I felt like everyone we ever met had an Eastern European accent. It was a bit surreal.
Well, yeah, there was a significant number of Eastern Europeans that came across when you had the new accession countries in 2001, was it, or something? You had like 15 essentially former Soviet nations join, or former Eastern Bloc anyway, nations join, and which gave them the right to come and work here. And most of them did, and then have now left. Basically, most of them have gone. Which actually is sort of a problem because we've now got vegetables rotting in the fields because British people aren't prepared to pick that shit for the pittance wages that they're offering. So there are a lot of, or were a lot of those sorts of people. But like I say, they will definitely notice a difference when lots of black and brown people turn up as the immigrants that we need for like doctors and things like that because we're not training enough of our own. So we go and steal them from other nations. Again, another of the vestiges of the empire where we can, we stole your diamonds, your gold, and your tea, and indeed slaves for generations, and now we're going to steal your doctors and nurses and teachers and shit. Anyway, the racists will definitely notice the difference because instead of white immigrants coming over, there will be non-white immigrants coming over.
Yeah, that's the thing. Is it a question? Now we've got back to Brexit because, like I said, I'd be making it the NHS election. But when it first started, all the talk was about Brexit. Johnson clearly thinks he's going to win because he pushed so hard for a general election. So he clearly thinks a general election will give him a majority. But we've already seen that blow up in the Tories' face once.
Yeah.
But let's say he gets a majority or he's got a solid coalition that gives him a majority. How much have you looked into what would be the time frame do you think it would be for a Brexit deal to actually be negotiated?
Wow. You raise a very interesting point because that's actually another element of the lie that I mentioned briefly there, but I'll elucidate further upon it. Johnson already has what's called the initial withdrawal agreement in place, right? Which was the bill he tried to pass before, and I will cut him this one bit of slack. When you say he tried really hard for a general election, that's true, but he was basically forced into that situation because Parliament refused to pass the bill, which I think is right that they refused to pass it because it's fucking atrocious. But the point being is that when a government can't govern, you have to do something else, i.e. a general election or a change of government, right?
Yeah.
So he already has that deal in place. It breaks all of the red lines. And again, he's such an untrustworthy gobshite. He literally said, I will never do anything which separates. And again, because they're the Conservative and Unionist Party, right? He said he would never endanger the Union. He would never put a separation between Northern Ireland and the mainland, which is the whole thing that the nationalist and unionist communities are dead against, right? And the DUP, the Democratic Unionist Party, have been propping up the Tories with their 10 votes as the supply and confidence motion. Partners, essentially, like not quite a formal coalition, but essentially acts as a coalition. And they've propped up the Tory party, and the Tory party have shit on the faces now, basically, by putting up essentially a border down the Irish Sea, where you're going to have the very, very weird situation of having Northern Ireland in as part of the UK, but having to have export declarations to move goods to the rest of their own country, which is ridiculous. And Boris Johnson said he definitely would never, ever, ever do.
Yeah.
And then did it, obviously, because when Boris Johnson says something, you can guarantee the opposite is true, basically. Anyway,
he did say he was going to be dead in a ditch before not going ahead.
Yeah, and yet that ditch has been lied to. That ditch is bereft of prime ministerial corpse, and that we're much the worse off for it. Anyway,
and I'm on the ditches side. Yeah.
But you end up. So Boris Johnson has this deal, right? Like as I briefly mentioned earlier, he's going to have Parliament, assuming he gets a majority or whatever. He's going to have Parliament sit certainly initially for the week leading up to Christmas and very possibly after Christmas, because the extension we got from the EU, which Boris Johnson said he would never ask for and then asked for, because again, he's just a fucking arse. Even though he did the childish thing of not signing the letter. So technically he did. Like, I didn't ask for it, honest. It was Parliament that forced me to. Like, no one cares that you didn't sign the paper. You asked for the fucking thing, you twat. Anyway, you have to follow the law. You're the Prime Minister, for fuck's sake. Anyway, the tangents, Kev. Right. He's got a deal in place. So the extension we got was to January the 31st next year, right?
Yes.
So we have to have that deal either passed, or we leave with no deal, or we get a further extension, which he's definitely promised would never happen. So it's very possible it might happen. Who fucking knows? But he's going to try and get that deal passed and the legislation in place by the January the 31st. Now, this is where the lie comes in, because literally the slogan for the Conservative Party's election is "Get Brexit Done." And if I hear that fucking phrase ever again, it will be too soon. Every interview you ever see with these fuckers, it's "Get Brexit done, get Brexit done, get Brexit done." So the lie is, though, that it doesn't get Brexit done. It starts Brexit. This whole fuckery we've been going through for the last 3 years is to get to the start line of the race of Brexit. The free trade agreement, which will be the ultimate actual Brexit, will decide, our future arrangements with our closest trading partners, which we needn't do because we already have a fucking great deal as we currently have as members of the European Union. But whatever, let's cut off our fucking nose to spite our face.
Yeah.
That starts then. That's the negotiation starts then on a free trade agreement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now, free trade agreements usually take anywhere up to 10 to 15 years, as indeed the one with Canada did, as the one with Singapore did, various other countries across the world. Now, ours will be quicker because we're already in regulatory alignment because we're members of the EU, right? So we're already in sort of lockstep in that regard. But even the most generous people I've seen who are experts in their field in terms of free trade negotiations say it will take at least 4 years to negotiate this free trade agreement with the EU. Boris Johnson has promised, again, his promises are worth nothing more than fucking used toilet paper at this point. He has promised that we will definitely have that free trade agreement in by the end of next year. Even though we're looking at very least 4, 5, 6 years of negotiations. But he reckons he can get it done by the end of next year because he lives in a fantasy land.
Or he just lives in a land where he can lie with impunity, because
there are no repercussions. So there's no incentive to ever change for these people.
I'm too sober for this conversation. I did talk with Kev before I started. I made some concoctions today. Oh no, that's not the one I wanted to try first. I'm going to try. I made 4 different drinks today with some rock candy.
Well, I did definitely mention before that you should be very drunk by the time we get round to this stage of the conversation because it will be boring and dry as fuck.
I haven't even taste tested these yet. So the next 10 minutes, I'm going to taste test these. And then I think I'm going to make my famous Brexit cocktail, which I'll leave you thinking about, but it's fucking deadly. The first thing I'm tasting as we continue to talk is cherry caramel vodka. So I'm going to be silent.
That does sound very nice.
It sounds good, doesn't it? It's oh yeah, it's pretty good. Drinking it out of my little rocket ship shot glass.
I mean, all I'll say is that this is about as badass as cocktails can get. You're pouring out of a skull decanter into a rocket ship shot glass. That's pretty badass, man.
Yes, yeah, I have. I was looking at like people who join in my live streams because I usually do them from my kitchen, and one of my beverages are behind me, and they comment on, "You are clearly a rampant alcoholic." And I went, "Hey, I just make cocktails, so I only use a little bit, but I need a lot of different things."
You should know, it's hey. They're called Australians.
Yeah, I know, right? But I did count them today.
Like the British or Irish have a leg to stand on, really.
I know. Well, that's who we inherited it from.
Well, exactly, yeah. Well, actually, it's God, a complete tangent, nothing to do with Brexit, but fuck it, we're going there. Thanksgiving in America recently happened.
Yes.
And happy Thanksgiving to the Americans who, celebrate that thing.
Yeah.
But it is sort of a celebration of kind of the start of a genocide.
Yeah.
Yeah. But someone said that no, we don't have like a special day in Britain for the start of each genocide, because if we did, we'd never do anything else. Which is very true, and was literally echoed by David Cameron, the former Prime Minister. The former Prime Minister, when he literally went to India as Prime Minister, on some trade mission thing, as they do, and was asked by one of the local journalists at one of these events about some massacre that had happened in the near vicinity and on some occasion 150 years prior, and was asked if he was prepared to, as the official, the head of the government of Britain, to apologise for that. And David Cameron said that he wouldn't be apologising, but he'd look into it. But the British Prime Minister couldn't possibly be asked to apologise for every crime that Britain did.
No, you couldn't. There's too many.
Because he's got other things to do. And you would never have time to do anything else.
I won't be in.
Anyway, but the point being that I made that joke on Twitter, and then had to point out, well, yeah, but even then, the genocide that the Americans did, that's still sort of on us, because those were British citizens.
That was actually people from Britain largely doing it.
Yeah, they went there. I mean, we didn't send them there as such, but yeah, that's still sort of on us as well. And the Aboriginal slaughter in Australia.
Oh, God, yes, that's another one.
That's another one that's sort of on us as well. But the brilliant thing about time is that we can now distance ourselves and say, no, those people did it over there, even though we literally sent them there.
Do you know what Aboriginal people call the frontier wars, which white people don't think there was any resistance, and there was armed resistance from the get-go. It's referred to as the frontier wars. The frontier wars continued through to the 1920s. There was actually armed resistance from Indigenous Australians up to the 1920s. My God, I only found that out recently.
Yeah, well, that's around the time of Bodyline that we were discussing earlier as well. So there's talking of gentlemen, So what do they call it then? You said they called it something different.
No, it's the Indigenous people who call it the frontier wars.
Oh, okay, sorry.
White people pretend it didn't happen. I'm not joking. Not joking.
Well, it's. I mean, in America, it's the same as well, but in Australia, especially because it's so well documented, the transition from there being no white people there to being white people there. The idea that the white man is, on the Australian continent is the oppressed person, which a lot of Australian conservatives seem to think is true, is just the most obviously false thing in the world. It's just nonsense. But there we go.
But I'm on to my second.
Actually, Uluru. They recently stopped people walking on it because it's like a holy thing in whatever it's Aboriginal religion, right?
Really
which they've been telling white people about forever. Don't walk on this, please. Please don't fucking walk on this. By all means, come and visit it. Come and look at it. Just don't fucking walk on it. It's like walking on people's graves and shit. Don't do it.
Look, if they had like St. Paul's Cathedral, then people can climb Uluru. But until I can climb St. Paul's Cathedral, fuck off out of Uluru.
Yeah. And they recently the graciousness of the Australian government to hand back the people their own fucking shit. Brilliant. But anyway, so they had like the Indigenous people. I don't know. Apologies, I don't know what their tribe's called anyway. But the Aboriginal people of that region, and now stopped people walking on it. So there was like a last minute rush of white people, and that's such a white people thing to do. Instead of going, I'm going to actually respect these people's decision. They don't want people walking on it. Fine. Let's all rush in one last mad dash to shit on them whilst we still can.
Yeah.
One Australian woman being interviewed, she was asked, like, well, do you understand that the Aboriginal people don't want you to walk on the thing? And she was like, yeah, I understand that. And then went on to basically say, but I don't care.
Yeah.
I'm going to walk on it anyway. Oh, for fuck's sake. What are you doing? What are you doing?
My personal favourite was there were two. There were the people who probably consider themselves quite progressive and spiritual who were posting like Instagram shit from Uluru about, oh, I'm one of the last people that feels so special and spiritual. And I go, you fucking jerk.
Yeah.
But the pinnacle was Pauline Hanson, head of the racist One Nation party. She, to make a statement was going to climb Uluru. It's actually quite difficult to climb it. It's really steep, and she's old. She's older than me, and she actually couldn't make it. She had to be helped down. I thought that was hilarious. I thought it was hilarious.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a big fucking rock. Yeah, it probably is a bit difficult to climb. Yeah. But yeah, I like the fact that, well, the supreme white specimen couldn't make it.
Yeah,
that's that again. Like the melting sculptures of the Tory / Brexit people. It's a lovely metaphor.
It's a beautiful metaphor. Yes. Anyway, speaking
of, I hope she was helped down by Aboriginal guides who were like, "We fucking told you, you silly bitch. We told you."
That's basically who helped her down. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm trying to remember what this is. This is orange melon gin I'm having now.
Oh yeah, and for those who don't know, Uluru, you might have heard of it as called Ayers Rock, which again, very white people. We're just going to name it our own shit.
Yes.
Even though we know you already have a name for it, but we're going to call it Ayers Rock for 200 years.
Yeah. Until we finally, what you knew it existed and you had your own name for it? Sure, okay.
Well, my favourite ever is the Indian cities, because I love, in my head, I've made up my own little story, which might be sort of true. For those who don't know, places like, you may have heard of the city of Bombay in India. It's not called Bombay, it's called Mumbai. It was always called Mumbai, but the British just decided we're going to call it Bombay. And I like the idea of just the little, he arrives there in his pith helmet and his red uniform and goes, what do you people, you brown chaps, call this place? It's Mumbai. Bombay? Put it on the map. You heard the man. Next. And just goes on to the next city. And because they're all sort of like Calcutta is Kolkata. So they basically just misheard the locals saying the name of the thing and thought, we'll make up our own spelling for the thing and just put it on the map. And that's true. And we're never going to change it. Fuck you.
It's like when after decades of people saying that's not how you say it, it's like, fuck you. Yes, it is.
Exactly. Well, we're not being told, we're not being corrected by colonials. It's not happening. We've decided it's called Bombay, and that's that. That's final. Queen Victoria has agreed to it. End of. It's just fucking madness. And that's the white supremacy thing. It's the we're right. It doesn't matter if we're wrong. We've decided we're right, and that's it. There's no argument to be had.
While we're on the Indigenous topic, there is a book that's becoming sort of central to the culture wars here in Australia. It's a very good book. I heard the audiobook version of it. It's called Dark Emu. A writer called Bruce Pascoe he researched the writings of early white settlers in Australia, and he basically found very compelling evidence that everything we've been told about Indigenous Australians is a complete lie. Like, we'd been told they were nomads, they were hunter-gatherers, they never stayed in one place, so you can't say we're taking anything away from them because they don't. But he's found from the writings of white settlers consistent, compelling evidence that the Indigenous people had agriculture, they had aquaculture, they had permanent settlements. They had like towns that had hundreds to thousands of people in them. So basically, everything we're told is an absolute lie. But my favorite bit of the whole book was one of the white settlers who really didn't even know what he was actually documenting. But he's saying like, oh, he's gone downriver with his family to claim some unclaimed land. And he said, and the native people, they were waving sticks and shouting something to us. And he wrote it down how he heard it phonetically. And he's like, I have no idea what they were saying, but I'm pretty sure it was like, oh, we're so happy that you're here and we can share everything with you. He was so sure they were welcoming him, which is a bit counterintuitive. But yeah, some later linguistic experts have said, okay, for the people who lived in that area, what he's written down phonetically doesn't mean anything. But we're looking at in the local language what's probably close to it. And they thought the most likely thing that was being shouted at him was some variant of, if you don't fuck off, we'll spear you. And he wrote in his journal, I'm sure that was a friendly greeting.
Yeah.
It's brilliant.
Fair enough, yeah. That's and not just that, but if you don't fuck off, we'll spear you. I think is official Australian immigration policy now, isn't it?
It's virtually the slight change in the terminology, but it is basically, official government policy right now.
Yeah, and not just that. I mean, I'll have to actually look that up. Dark emu. I'll look that up because that sounds fascinating. But the point I would raise would be a basic point of, even if they were nomads, if you take the land they were nomadic around, you are taking something from them, which is their land.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know.
Yeah. And I mean, and it was no one thing. There were hundreds of nations across this extremely large continent.
Well, exactly. It's a big fucking place. Yeah, there's going to be lots of different types of people there.
Yeah, yeah. But if we pull things back momentarily, we've been talking generally about colonialism, which we're both products of, I guess. But pulling it back to the election, how much have you read? Like you mentioned that the Tories put out a fake Labor manifesto. How much have you at all looked into the actual real Labor manifesto?
I've read it cover to cover. I as with the 2017 manifestos, I did a series. I was going to do a series on this. I'm too frankly depressed with the whole thing to bother on this occasion. But I have read the Labour Party manifesto and will be reading the Conservative one. Not that it's very long, but I will be as things progress. And yeah, I actually really like the Labour Party manifesto. I think it's very good. It's one of the most radical in terms of public spending that there's been, let's say, since Thatcher. The most radical since Michael Foot in the 80s. But largely those policies are actually quite popular. Part of the problem is the fact that Jeremy Corbyn is sort of hole below the waterline based on I mentioned the mostly non-existent anti-Semitism in the Labour Party, but the anti-Semitism that has existed, he's not dealt with well, which gives ammunition to his enemies, and the lies that have been spread about him by a lot in the press, which means that even though his policies are actually very good and quite popular, he is enormously unpopular, which means that, I don't think he can ever become Prime Minister, but I'd like to see whoever replaces him stick with that sort of policy platform, if that makes sense. Yeah,
it will be very interesting to me what happens in this election, because as I was saying, from the outside, the way when Johnson got blocked, he was trying to, bully Labor into agreeing to a general election before there had been anything about Brexit written into law. And Labor had said, not until we get no deal off the table. That to me, as I said before, suggested strongly that Johnson believes he'll get a majority in a general election. We'll see. But because Corbyn was elected Labor leader by the rank and file quite convincingly. And twice. And a lot of people in the establishment, like the Blairites and whatnot, in the Labor Party are really hostile to him. But I think, it's not them who votes in a general election. It's the rank and file. So I really just want to see what happens in this general election, because I just think the media and the political class are completely untrustworthy, and I just don't know what's going to happen in the general election.
Yeah, a lot of the mainstream press is unsurprising, given the fact that they're essentially Tory party stooges. A lot of for your Australians, you'll be very aware of a man by the name of Rupert Murdoch.
Yes,
everything ever, it would appear, including Fox News in America. So that's the kind of guy we're talking about, and he owns loads of British newspapers like the Sun, the Telegraph, and all those sorts of things. So you'd expect from the Murdoch press and various of his sort of political acolytes who own other media to be against Corbyn and to smear him and all the rest of it. But one element of this, which I didn't necessarily expect, but I'm so disgusted by, is the BBC, which is supposed to be neutral and clearly isn't anymore, unfortunately. You've had several instances, one where during one of these things where the question time leader special, where the leaders individually went out and had to answer questions from the audience, and Johnson at one point was making a point about truth being really important in politics, and the crowd laughed because they all know he's not trustworthy. That's basically his fucking calling card. And the BBC edited out the laughter when they played it back. They also had the thing with the laying of the wreath, the poppy wreath, on Remembrance Sunday, where the stupid bastard put the wreath upside down with the poppies facing downwards. Now, that's not the end of the world, because it's just a poppy wreath. Who really gives a fuck? I'm not electing the man Prime Minister on his ability to notice which way poppies are up or down, right? But the BBC still decided to put in a piece of footage of him from like 3 years prior, doing it correctly this time, which someone in the research department came out and said that wouldn't have been an accident, because you have to literally ring up the archive department and order a specific piece of tape from a specific date, and they will send it to you for use in that clips package. So they clearly edited him making a silly mistake, which really shouldn't be important at all, to him doing it correctly from years prior. And then the thing that really enraged me, really drove me fucking spare, was on the day that the report, which I mentioned earlier, that Labour had gotten a hold of the trade talks between Americans and British representatives about, opening up the NHS pharmaceutical procurement stuff, which obviously should be the lead story. It's fucking huge. It was bombshell news. And whilst the BBC did obviously bring it up and it was featured, the lead thing on the 6 o'clock news was Boris Johnson making jam scones.
God, that bloody persona that the media have swallowed whole for Johnson about, oh, what a lovable knockabout sort of buffoon he is. No, he's a dangerous, racist, power-mad fucking lunatic.
Not just that, but he's an upper class conscious class warrior. Would be ultimately as well. It's not just that he's a racist garbage bag, but if you look at the way in which he's referred to the children of single mothers as ill-bred, and
very
things like that, he hates the poor, basically, which obviously encompasses a lot of racial minorities as well in Britain. He's a really nasty individual, and like you say, he's essentially been living off 20 years of press complicity in his nonsense, because for a start, the simple act of literally referring to him as Boris, not as Mr. Johnson, not by his official title, like when he was Foreign Secretary or something like that, they referred to him as Boris. So he becomes this nice, personable human chap in a way that a politician shouldn't be. The media should never be that comfortable and that friendly and congenial towards any politician. Not that you have to necessarily be entirely antagonistic if they're doing a good job, for instance. But the point is, when you just relay this positive press spin constantly, you don't actually expose the real person. And so he's been living on this funny, affable chap, the famous image from the 2012 Olympics when he was the mayor and he got caught. There was a rope slide thing and he got stuck halfway across. That was staged. That was literally, he said before that the rope slide operator had said that there was no way that could have been an accident. They staged that because it's part of the lovable buffoon character. Look at him. He's waving the Union Jacks, and that's going to be the front image on every fucking newspaper the next day. And that's how he does it. And you have to say the people behind him, in a purely Machiavellian sense, ignoring the morality of it, are fucking brilliant. They've been able to sell this image of this person who doesn't exist.
I mean, John Oliver did a really good job of deconstructing, even down to the messed up hair and whatnot. It's all fake. It's really disturbing.
It is. It really is. And exactly with the hair. Comb your fucking hair. Just comb your hair, mate. What are you doing? Like it's so obviously a part of that thing. And he does that thing where he ruffles his hair when he's asked a difficult question. Now that doesn't replace an answer, but for his voters, clearly it does, because they don't require an answer to the question. The hair ruffle and the that counts as an answer. That bumbling, stumbling nonsense is fine. And I genuinely look. There are lots of things I dislike about Britain, but there are not many things I absolutely detest. But the conservative, or more precisely, the working class conservative voter is someone I do detest, because it doesn't make any fucking sense, especially when you've got someone like Boris Johnson, who clearly detests the working class, and yet you're going to vote him into office because the immigrants. Fuck you. Fuck you.
All right, well, that's pushed me on to the tequila. I'm trying my pine lime tequila. That's
how depressing can I make it, and what alcohol will soothe?
Yeah, no, I'm gonna knock this back. Wait till I'm gonna do my Brexit cocktail before we finish. It's devastating. That I think you really hit on something. Like, you often get people on the left say, why do poor people vote against their interests by voting Conservative? And I think that's less of a thing in the US and Australia. I do objectively agree with it, but it's like, you can't really tell people, what their primary voting thing is. And you get the Republicans in the US and the Conservative coalition in Australia appealing to certain fear things in poor white people, whatnot. But in the UK, you got people like Johnson and Jacob Mogg Rees, who to me is a fucking caricature, who clearly actively hate poor people.
Yeah, absolutely. Although I think that is true, because I think partly because, again, it sort of goes back to empire. In America and in Australia, you have the sense of having been, even though, like you say, a lot of them try and pretend that they're English or whatever, you know that you weren't the power. You were the people being sort of subjugated in a way. So again, white people, you don't get to play the victim on this one. Just saying. Anyway, the point is, in Britain, we still have that kind of, it almost is, the Conservative Party has become like an 1850s reenactment society, where they really want to be the colonial masters, which is part of the reason they like having Northern Ireland, because it's the one bit of land that someone else should have that we still have. That and the Falklands, I suppose. Anyway, so it's those kind of almost Dickensian kind of people who literally despise the poor, but yet pander to the poor because they need them to vote for them, because they can't just subjugate them anymore. They actually have to win their votes, because democracy is a thing. Anyway, they do still exist. And actually, it's interesting that you mentioned Jacob Rees-Mogg, because obviously at the start of this election campaign, he made a complete twat of himself in regard to the Grenfell Tower fire, which people may be aware of. From 2017, where about 70 people, I think it was, died in a horrible tower fire brought about by the fact that the Conservative local council, had put on essentially the most flammable cladding on the outside of the building possible, and so it burned to the ground for want of money, basically. Anyway, that happened. 2 years later, which was a few weeks ago, they had the inquiry report was released. And I will give Johnson his due. He acted like a prime minister. He actually genuinely came out and looked like he gave a shit. He doesn't, but at least he acted like the prime minister should in that situation. But Jacob Rees-Mogg, who's a member of Boris Johnson's government, went on the radio and gave one of the most ridiculous interviews you will ever see, where he basically sort of shit on the dead people for having died.
Yeah, he basically said if they were smarter, they would have got out.
Yeah, which is amazing. Absolutely fucking incredibly insensitive, brutal, and, like I say, Dickensian. Genuinely sort of blaming the people who were manslaughtered, in essence, for having been manslaughtered by Tory austerity policies. Anyway, I predicted that the Tory party would not allow him anywhere near a fucking microphone or a camera for the entire general election campaign. And that has come to pass. He has disappeared off the face of the earth. No one has heard of him ever again.
Even there was that in the lead up to the proroguing of Parliament, there was that photo that was circulated of him basically lounging, sleeping on the benches in Parliament, just radiating contempt.
Well, yeah, but the thing is, people don't seem to know, which it makes sense because when you're a backbencher, no one really gives a fuck. But he always did that, right? That was always his thing. There were loads of images going back years and years where he would do that, which no one really gives two fucks about when you're a backbencher. But when you're a government minister on the front bench, slouched in front of the dispatch box, like you say, showing complete contempt for the people of Britain. Like you can't even be bothered to sit up. Like you've got a spine. You literally, I mean, metaphorically, maybe not, but literally you have. Sit the fuck up. Like, what are you doing? And again, I don't get this with Johnson. Having Jacob Rees-Mogg made certain sense because he was essentially trying to pander to the far right, not far right, but the extreme right of the Conservative parties, Brexiteer mob, which is called the ERG, the European Research Group, of which Jacob Rees-Mogg used to be the leader, or whatever they call it, convener, whatever they call them. So he brought him on board and gave him a relatively pointless position, which is leader of the House of Commons, which is largely like an administrative thing, and brought him on board to get those people on side so they would vote for his deal, which they didn't really particularly necessarily want to vote for because it's not a hard enough Brexit, which is ridiculous in of itself. Anyway, but that was the mistake he made, was that Jacob Rees-Mogg is such an unsaleable character to the British people because he's so nakedly that Victorian character. And that's the thing he's built up for himself and clearly works in his constituency. But across the nation, everyone looks at him and sees the clown that's there. So having him as a government minister was always going to blow up in his face. Yeah. I will say, that was the one glaring error that Boris Johnson has made in terms of the political dynamic, because he's unfortunately a clever political operator in the sense that he's gotten to a certain position, even though he really oughtn't to have. If he was a poor kid with that set of skills, he wouldn't have gotten to where he is. But even so, he's gotten to the position he is. And having Jacob Rees-Mogg there was always going to fuck up. And it didn't take that long. It only took a couple of months, and it came out and basically slagged off people who were dead. Like, come on. And not just that, but literally at the very start, it was like 2 days after the election had been announced. Like, oh, for God's sake, you are getting off on the completely wrong foot there.
Yes, is a bit wrong. Yeah, but it's just the way he looks and all the time he talks about his nanny and growing up, and he's obviously so disconnected from 99.9% of Britons. Like, you know, like if I was writing something like, I want to write a character who's an upper class Tory toff who's detached from the ordinary people, and if the person returned to me a character who was literally Jacob Rees-Mogg, I'd go, no, that's too on the nose. No one's going to believe that.
Yeah, exactly. That's a bit much. No one's going to believe that. Let's tone it down a bit, shall we? People that he literally gets referred to as my two favourite are the Right Honourable Member for the 18th Century and the Right Honourable Member for Downton Abbey is another one.
Yeah, both.
He really is. He's a caricature of like a Victorian tough. Like you can see him forcing a child up a chimney or something. You know?
Oh, absolutely. It's like this could be just betraying my age talking about Dave Allen, the Irish comedian.
Oh, I love Dave Allen. Yeah,
he was on TV perpetually when I was growing up, just repeats of his stuff. But he had an archetypal character he basically referred to as like the English eccentric or the English twit, and it would be this guy who talked in a very particular way, and like dandruff dust would fly off as his head shook. And in one interview, he said, I got called to task once by this guy who said that was an unfair stereotype of upper class English types. And he says, and I swear to God, this guy was 10 times worse than my caricature. And yet he was complaining about my portrayal, and I could just barely hold myself back from, my comedic portrayal is not as out there as you in real life.
Yeah. Oh, they do exist. Some of these people, well, I suppose that's the difference between, say, like America and Australia and Britain, is that whilst there are obviously people who consider themselves like upper crust or whatever in those former colonial places, there are people in Britain who genuinely are of that ilk. There are people who genuinely are upper class, like who still exist. There are people, not just the fact that we have royalty, because there are people. Imagine this: there are people in Britain who make the Queen look rather common. I'll put it that way.
People whose families have owned large tracts of the country for centuries.
Yeah. Like crazy posh, like just on another planet, literally from another era, from like fucking 500 years ago. Absolutely mad, and they literally live in fucking castles and shit. Like there aren't many of them left, thankfully. They're a dwindling number, but they do exist. Well, I mean, technically the Queen lives in a fucking castle, but you know what I mean. Like that's taxpayer funded. These people can afford on their own. Well, it's not their own; it's stolen money, but their own private money to live in like castles and mansions and stuff, and have they've got like wings on their house. What?
Yeah.
Have you been into the West Wing?
Yeah.
No. What are you talking about? I've got fucking 2 bedrooms, you cunt. Shut up.
You remind me of the old Hugh Grant movie, 4 Weddings and a Funeral, where one of his friends is super rich, and when they go for a party at his house, it's basically a castle. It's like a 200-room mansion, and he just casually says in conversation to his friend, "Are you the richest person in England?" And he's like, no, we're 4th or 5th, I think.
Yeah. So that's what when we talk about them, the being people who genuinely are like Dickensian, hate the poor. Yeah, they genuinely are. We're not even Scrooge, because Scrooge was essentially middle class, but like have the Scrooge mentality, but with Queen money.
Yeah. All right, I'm up to my last concoction I'm tasting now. This is cola aniseed flavored vodka that's going to seem to. Wow, that's really special. I'm a big fan of my own work, quite honestly. These alcoholic beverages I've made for myself today are really tasty.
It's even though this is a completely weird tangent, and I am sober, but
yes.
When I watch your live streams, I like watching out the back because it gets darker and darker behind you. But that shouldn't entertain me because it gets dark here too. Like we have nighttime. Why is that entertaining?
Because it's summer in Australia. Currently here in Melbourne, we're a couple weeks away from the longest day of the year. In Melbourne, it gets dark between 8:30 and 9 o'clock now. We started this live stream at 8 local time. So it was quite light behind me when we started, and it's completely dark now. It's just after 9:30 now. But yeah, no, that's.
No, but I understand the dynamic of night and day passing.
Do you?
I've been around a while now. It's happened. I've seen it. But I still enjoy it. I don't know why. I don't know why. It's the same sun. It's the same sun we get. It's exactly the same thing, just 12 hours later or whatever, or 11 hours later. Yeah. But yeah, there's something quite pleasant about that.
You being closer to the pole in summer.
We're closer to millions of poles. Yeah. Poland. So I did a joke about Poland. Never mind.
What's the latest it gets dark in summer where you are?
Oh wow. Actually, it's probably not far off, about 8, half 8, something like that. It's like it gets dark there, yeah, at the height of summer.
Because you get to some places where their longest days in summer, are bordering on 20 hours. Of course, you get pole and it's 24 hours. But
yeah, the Arctic Circle. It's they have like 3 months a year where it's just all sun, and then 3 months where it's all dark. Move.
Oh yeah,
Move south would be my advice.
definitely. Or you get things like that great horror movie, 30 Days of Night. Don't know if you've ever seen that.
I have not.
Oh my god, it's just the most violent vampire movie I have ever seen. I love it because it's like these Eurotrash vampires who've been around for centuries. They go, hey, you know what? I saw on CNN that there's this town right up in the Arctic, like north of Alaska, where they're in complete darkness for 30 days. 30 days smorgasbord, my brothers. And they basically cut this town off from the outside world, and they've got 30 days of freedom to kill everyone in the town. And oh my god, it's the most violent vampire movie I've ever seen. I love it.
I'm not a fan of horror, to be honest. It bores me.
I'm not a huge horror fan, but this one, just the combination, because the vampires are complete Eurotrash, and the idea that they've latched on to this idea that this town's in darkness for 30 days, so they don't have to worry about the sun coming up for 30 days. I just love that as a plot device.
Yeah, no, that it's interesting.
Yeah.
Although I quite like the concept of vampires in general, actually.
Yeah. I do like vampires. They're very sexy.
Well, okay, if you're into that sort of thing.
Oh, I'm totally into it. That's the thing. Look, I'm going to keep talking. I need to pick up a couple pieces. I'm going to round up our election talk by making a Brexit cocktail. And this is possibly as damaging to me and my liver as Brexit may be to the UK. But we'll see. So I'm just going to walk around a little bit and pick up some stuff.
Okay. Well, we'll wait and see. We'll have to get the toxicology report from your liver because Brexit's going to fuck up Britain. So
yeah,
I don't know. Look, that's a big claim. I want to see if you don't turn yellow at some point, then your claim doesn't hold up at all.
All right, well, we'll see. First, I'm going to get an ice ball. That's very sophisticated. If I have a big ball of ice.
See, I think only in Australia would a ball of ice be considered sophisticated.
There it is. There we go. All right, so now here's my Brexit cocktail. Has to encapsulate a lot of the different elements of Brexit. So I got to basically address.
Well, I wouldn't advise drinking that much bullshit.
Well, step one, we'll represent England with gin. England's great gift to the world.
Well, not if you go by Hogarth. He didn't seem to think it was.
No, Mother's Ruin.
Indeed.
There are a lot of negative names for gin because it's such a high alcohol content compared to others. Now, the next thing that's going in, because one of the very big questions in Brexit is the Ireland question. So we need some Irish whiskey to represent the Ireland question.
Indeed so. Yeah, that has been, well, it's been the downfall of one and possibly two Conservative prime ministers.
Yes, exactly. Now we need to get some of the continent involved. So I have some French cognac here. So I'm going to put a little bit of French cognac in there. These are not, but anyone worrying at home, I'm not putting entire shots. I'm putting like half shots of this alcohol. And because a lot of people,
but if you put in 50 half shots, that's still 25 shots.
Oh, you and your mathematics. I don't know what's going on there. And because a lot of people are bitter, both pro and anti-Brexit people are bitter about things that are happening. I'm going to put a bitter Italian Amaro in there, because that's both European and bitter. So that
true, but it's difficult not to be bitter. The situation is shit.
Yes, that's true. And to really just knock this shit on the head, the people who are going to be upset that they can't easily go for their Spanish holidays anymore, this is a Spanish absinthe.
Also, as it's blue and the entire Brexit situation was a Tory concoction.
Yes.
Appropriate.
Yeah, blue, and it's also 80% alcohol. So I'm not...
That is Oh, well, you're going to go blind.
Yeah, that's 80% alcohol I'm putting in there. All right, and just to
You can run cars on that.
Yep, you sure could. I'm going to put a little bit of lemon juice in because lemon juice is nice in a cocktail. And just to take the edge off it and put some sugar syrup as well. This is actually agave syrup, but it's basically a sweetener. So that is what makes up a Brexit cocktail. All the little flavors of Brexit are in here.
But I'm sure it's going to be really nice, which it means it's not at all like Brexit.
Yeah. Oh my God, it's a very murky color.
Well, maybe it is a bit like Brexit then.
So it's
oh wow, that is.
Look, for anyone listening to this later, it is basically a green pond scum sort of color.
It's pond water.
It is visually not appealing, and that would be the blue.
Well, actually, it's the perfect metaphor for Brexit. It looks terrible, but you're going to drink it anyway.
You're going to drink it anyway, so. Oh God, it actually tastes pretty good though.
Yeah,
it is actually.
It sounded quite nice.
So, yeah, it's an ugly looking thing. If Brexit works out as well as this cocktail worked out, things would be okay. But honestly, there's serious misgivings about what's going to happen in the immediate future. So many unknowns. I guess we're going to have to wait and see it unfold.
Yeah, basically. We're all essentially on hiatus until the 12th, and then we can at least begin to see a path forward one way or the other, because until we have a government in place, nothing can happen.
Yeah. And obviously, a Tory majority means fairly aggressive pushing ahead with Johnson's view of the world. Whereas if Labor are able to form a government either by themselves or in coalition, now
it would have to be coalition, realistically speaking. Even if the polls are out a bit, they're still not going to get a majority on their own. They would have to form a coalition, probably with the Scottish National Party, because they look like they're going to get 40 odd seats. So that's possible.
Yeah. So if they did think, if I understand correctly, you may know this better than me. Corbyn has basically said, you know what? If we win power, we are going to have a second referendum. We're going to say, okay, here's an actual realistic Brexit deal that could be enacted. So we are now going to vote on, do you want this Brexit plan that could feasibly be enacted, or do you want to stay in the EU? That's basically what he said, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. His plan, and it would actually be very quick and straightforward, because it would suit the EU down to the ground. Because Corbyn's basic plan for his deal would be that Britain remains part of the single customs union. So we would leave the European Union, but we would still keep in regulatory alignment in terms of like exports and stuff, which is very easy to arrange because you don't need to change anything. So it would be very, very straightforward. There would be no need for any border, either a hard border on the island of Ireland or an artificial border down the Irish Sea. Because you have regulatory alignment, it wouldn't be an issue. You wouldn't need to declare anything because it's all the same. So that would be his deal. He would then come back to the people of Britain and put that to a second referendum. Now, the odd situation is he said he would remain neutral on the matter, which is probably the best thing in terms of trying to unite the country. But unfortunately, when you're in a disunited situation, which we very, very much are, with two warring factions on an island, basically, not choosing a side means that neither side trusts you. So he's sort of, it's sort of the statesman-like thing. It's the only, basically, the Labour Party in this general election are the only party who are actually putting forward anything akin to a compromise. One, you're either absolutely pro-Brexit or absolutely against Brexit. Whereas they're saying, well, actually, clearly there are millions of people on both sides. Let's try and come to some arrangement, which is maybe the good thing to do, but it's not necessarily the successful thing to do, unfortunately.
Yeah. And I mean, unless I'm completely crazy, I think Corbyn is not the biggest fan of the European Union
No,
anymore.
no. Well, not just anymore. Actually, he's more pro EU now because he's the leader of a pro EU party. But when he was a backbencher, he was a Brexiteer before Brexit was a thing. Like, he's always hated, but for different reasons than the Tories do, because
Yeah.
there are lots of very like free market things that go on in the EU that he and a lot of old school leftists don't like, which actually I'm sort of in agreement with. But the point is, it's not going to be better when the Tories have free reign.
No. Because that's the thing. The Brexit public discourse, the people who self-nominated as the public faces of pro-Brexit, their central thing was just racism. It was xenophobia and racism. Whereas you can mount a really solid left-wing case for opposing the European Union.
Absolutely. Yeah, they're called Lexiteers, sort of left Brexiteers, of which, like I say, Corbyn was a trailblazer before any of this was ever an issue. And was seen as something of a kook, really. But I mean, in hindsight, he was sort of ahead of the game in that regard, I suppose.
Absolutely.
But yeah, you absolutely can make a good argument for that. So if it was, let's leave the EU and end neoliberalism and a lot of the kind of privatization of public assets and things like that, which the European Union are definitely involved in. And whilst they don't necessarily enforce it on people, other than maybe Greece because of horrific financial situation, they certainly encourage that sort of thing, which I don't particularly like. If it was, let's leave the European Union and do those things, or end those things, and become a better place, that would be awesome. But actually, it was, let's leave the EU because the foreigners, or let's leave the EU because of lies, and they are genuinely lies. Like the one that's stuck in the mind is the straight bananas. I don't know if you're aware of that particular.
Yes.
They made up a lie, the Daily Mail and various other of these horrific newspapers, that the EU was going to force us to sell straight rather than bent bananas. Now, that's clearly absurd because I don't even know if you can grow straight bananas as such. But B, the extra lie on top of that is that the EU changed the regulations to the regulations that the UK government had already had in place. So actually, it was the rules that Britain had in place being imposed on the rest of the EU. So actually, they'd come into regulatory alignment with us. We didn't have to change a thing, which is why if you go into, say, a British grocer's of some variety, you will see very, very bendy fucking bananas because they were lying to you, you idiots.
And there is a very, very, very long list of lies about EU regulations.
The hair nets for fishermen.
Yes.
They were going to make fishermen wear hair nets because they were involved in food preparation and therefore had to. No. Obviously, they're not going to make fishermen wear fucking hair nets, which, again, if you go to any coastal town, you will see lots of fishermen, none of which are wearing fucking hair nets. They were lying to you.
Yeah.
Oh
my God. All right. So, look, I think we might leave our election and Brexit talk there. And look, I'm probably going to end up face down somewhere after my Brexit cocktail. Hopefully, things work out a bit better for the UK and Europe. But time will tell. Thank you so much for your time, Kevin.
Well, thank you for having me on. I was honored.
I think we need to. Okay, I mean, I've been on your live streams a few times. You've been on mine a few times. This is the first time I'm using it for a podcast. I definitely would like to have you on for podcast stuff more often. So we'll have to set that up.
Yeah, definitely. I'm up for a regular slot.
Excellent. I like a regular slot. Or in AIDS's case, a regular slut. That's just throwing that in there for no reason. I'm just slamming my regular collaborator.
But he's also a regular slut. So
he is a regular slut. He'd be the first.
Yeah.
So yes, if you're listening via podcast land, Kevin, if people want to catch up with you, what internet outlets can they find you?
Well, firstly, if you want to catch up with me, I would suggest seeking medical assistance. But if you wish to indulge your particular illness, you can catch me on the YouTubes as Kevin Logan, or on Twitter at KFLogan2019, because my original account got terminated by Nazis. Or if you just go to any of my YouTube videos, all my contact stuff is there, and you can give me money as well. Give me all of your fucking money.
Good plan. And you can find me just by searching Angry Aussie on the various social media, YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, Angry Aussie Podcast.
Send him chocolate wrappers.
Yeah. Find me on YouTube. I foolishly put my post office box on all my YouTube videos, and I get interesting stuff in the mail. Feel free. If you send me something really cool and give a return address, I'll send you a postcard back. That can't say fairer than that.
See, I'm sort of tempted to, but it's probably way more expensive than $1 to send you.
Oh yeah,
that joke would seem like slightly pointless to send you a chocolate wrapper for fucking 10,000 miles.
Yes, it is a strange world we live in. I hope you all look after yourself in your part of the world. I hope you keep abreast of what both Kev and I are doing, and hope to see you on another podcast later. But we'll say bye for now. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
All right, so that's the podcast out. So now we can say goodnight to these really special people who are in the live chat.
Hello, special people in the live chat.
Yeah. I just heard Joe asking me if I was going to stream Borderlands 3, because I actually bought Borderlands 3 today in the Black Friday sales. And I played a little bit. But
what the important question is, when is it White Friday?
Yes. There was a beautiful, it was a Cyanide and Happiness comics, where it's like someone say, hey, it's Black Friday, and some fat redneck person, what about all Friday?
Yeah, all Fridays matter.
All Fridays matter. It's like, what the fuck?
Yeah. That's still my favorite. I like calling International Women's Day, when is International Men's Day Day?
Yeah, which was just it was a couple of weeks ago.
It was indeed. And I spent the day pointing out to MRAs, why aren't you doing anything for International Men's Day, you fucking twats?
And in all seriousness, Aidsy and I did a live stream on International Men's Day, and because he'd been researching the incels, and we were genuinely, unironically, talking about strategies to help incels, help them be less unhappy, help them be more fulfilled members of society, and even help them have sex.
Yeah. Well, this is the thing, on a sort of tangent with the pickup artists, right? If the pickup artists did what they claim to do when being interviewed by like mainstream people, which is like, we're helping men with their self-confidence, and we're helping them interact with members of the public, like women and men, and just generally be more happy and contented, that would be awesome. They're not, though. They're teaching them to sexually be aggressive and violent towards women. But the only way to actually stop that kind of incel, well, I mean, it has actually boiled over into terrorism on occasion.
Oh, absolutely.
That kind of the more kind of low-level misogyny is actually just to make these guys feel less shit about themselves, because it is also ultimately an expression of internal hatred or contempt or whatever. So make them better or not make them, but encourage them and advocate for them to better themselves, become physically more, well, not even necessarily fit, but just healthier. Make them more healthy of body and healthy of mind, and actually a lot of these problems will go away.
Oh yeah. And because Aidsy because he's like, on the autism spectrum, and he was diagnosed later in life, like in his mid-20s, and so he's spent ages learning how people work. So the shit that the pickup artists do badly, their neuro-linguistic programming and behavioral psychology and that type of stuff, he's actually really good at.
Oh, wow. Yeah.
So
that sounds like that could be really important in terms of, like I say, encouraging these people to.
So because he worked as a stand-up comedian for years, and then when he became too physically unwell to sort of keep up with the punishing nature of the live stand-up scene, he sorry, I just realised this thing's still running. I'm going to stop it. He actually took on a role as being a mentor for young, and they weren't all male, but they were mostly male. But he was a mentor for young stand-up comedians. But with the guys in particularly, what he was teaching them was life skills because they didn't have them. And so he's basically translated what he learned training young comedians into this shit would help incels. So, because he was mortified when he looked up incels, he didn't really know what they were. And he looked them up and said, wait. They're praising a mass murderer. What the fuck is this about?
Yeah, it's I think if regular society got hold of some of the darker recesses of the internet, they would be really astonished and disgusted by some of the people that lurk therein.
Yes. And terrified.
Yeah. Well, I remember trying to explain Roosh V to like a family member, a normal human being who's a family member, because I was explaining, like, my dad had said, like, oh, Kev, tell him about the YouTube you do. Because he doesn't understand. He doesn't understand what these things are. It's hilarious. Yeah. He literally asked me the other day, "How's the internet going?" Yeah, fair enough, Dad. Thanks. Anyway, and so I was explaining Roosh V to a friend and explaining his infamous legalized rape on private property article. And his face, he looked at me like I was talking about an alien or something. He couldn't fathom it.
Yeah. And of course, the beauty of when it was discovered that Roosh V was literally living in his mum's basement.
Yeah.
It's
an amazing thing, isn't it?
Oh
literally, it's the meme. It's the meme come to life. Amazing. Yeah.
There's a couple of things that you've probably seen, Kev, because you keep up with them. Before we go, I mean, if you're happy, we can sit here and talk all night, but it's early morning your time. I don't know if you want to go to bed. But
no, I'm good, man.
A couple of things I've seen this week were absolutely astonishing because they summarized these particular dipshits perfectly. Paul, a tweet, I don't know if you saw it, from Paul Joseph Watson.
Oh, okay.
I've just found it here. He's saying Democratic operatives who previously worked for Barack Obama are creating fake news websites, even newspapers, which are purposely designed to look real in order to push liberal talking points and help the Democrats win the 2020 election. And he's saying that like that's some great evil, as if his whole career is making up bullshit.
I was about to say, is he just outraged because they've stolen his gig?
Yeah, does he think they owe him royalties or something?
Yeah, exactly, yeah. He's got the copyright on that shit.
Yeah. It's insane. And there was
it is. It's the very Trumpian thing, isn't it? Of crying fake news while telling nothing but lies.
Yeah. And that dipshit Charlie Kirk.
The biggest faced human being in the fucking world. Yeah.
He's now got upset because notoriously there's that chicken chain, Chick-fil-A, which was donating to homophobic entities. And Charlie Kirk's on record as saying, oh, how soft are the people who are triggered by delicious chicken, you know? And now Chick-fil-A have said, okay, we've listened to people and we're not funding these fuckheads anymore. And this is an actual... After Charlie Kirk has said, you're weak and pathetic if you're triggered by chicken, he's tweeted, Chick-fil-A betrayed us. We stood by them for years during every attack and controversy. Despite this, they announced they will no longer support Christian organizations, which is a lie. Even worse, they've come out in support of the Southern Poverty Law Center. No more Chick-fil-A ever. So he's literally doing the exact thing that he says is a sign of weakness and being too easily triggered. And they're irony-proof, these people.
Yeah, well, absolutely. Well, I literally tweeted that out with my own message of, I thought this motherfucker was against cancel culture. I guess not.
It's just what the fuck? And this ties back to even what we were saying about Johnson and whatnot. They can lie as much as they like because they're never held to account for their fucking lies.
Well, no, it's less dangerous and insidious for someone like Charlie Kirk because ultimately he's not actually powerful. But the point is that he's never held to account because he's got billionaire money coming in. He doesn't actually for a man who preaches the free market, he doesn't actually have to rely on the free market. So he can lie all he likes and it doesn't matter.
The best line and I've stolen this line, but someone on Twitter said it, because Charlie Kirk just repeatedly makes an absolute fool of himself.
How dare you? He's one of the foremost intellectuals of our age.
And he repeatedly just contradicts himself and looks like a fool. And I saw what someone sort of captured 2 tweets of Charlie Kirk that are saying the absolute opposite to one another. And they've just captioned it, for someone against socialism, Charlie Kirk sure likes being publicly owned.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, nothing will ever beat the him losing his shit at Cenk Uygur in that stage. Just screaming at him. Yeah. How much do you earn, Cenk? I live by my principles every day. Oh, well done. Well done, Charlie.
What they're copying now, Charlie Kirk copped it, and fucking Donald Trump Jr. copped it. The ultra-right...
Yeah, but from Nazis, yeah.
...racists that they unleashed are now turning on them. Yeah. And they're showing up for public events. And these fucking lunatics are heckling them, and they're running off stage, and they're abandoning their own events, not because of intolerant leftists, but because of neo-Nazi uber racists are there heckling them.
Well, brilliantly, a man with the most Hispanic name ever, but he's a white nationalist, Nicholas Fuentes.
Yes.
Just a beautiful.
He's beautiful. This shit.
He is. Well, yeah, he's a Nazi piece of garbage. And it's his group who he calls America First. How original. How did you come up with that, Nick?
Yeah.
Anyway, he was, like you say, those kind of movements have been spawned by the likes of Charlie Kirk. And now he's turning up to events and asking questions that Charlie Kirk doesn't like, because they've spawned these Nazi fuckers who turn up to events and ask questions about, well, why are the Jews running everything? And that's a little bit too spicy for Charlie. But you made this. You made this monster. It's a Frankenstein thing. You've made the monster, and the monster has turned on you, you fucking idiot. And you know what? As much as I'm never going to cheer on the Nazis, I'm also not going to feel sorry for you being booed by Nazis.
But like Don Jr. literally called his book Triggered, and it's like subtitled How the Intolerant Left is Shutting Down Discourse. And he goes to do a book launch, and these neo-Nazis shout him down, and he runs away. It's like, he's dead.
Yeah, that's the thing. Like, leftists will campaign against you if they dislike you. They won't go into the event and like fuck you up and force you to run away or whatever. By and large, I'm not saying it never happens, but you created this monster. You're getting bitten by it, and like you say, it's ironic that he called it Trigger, because A, that's a meme from 5 years ago. Get the fuck over yourself, Don.
Yeah.
B, you didn't fucking write it. I doubt you've even read it. And C, who's triggered now? Really? Who's the one that's triggered? Dickheads.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I can't recommend highly enough the podcast Behind the Bastards. I really love.
Well, the name alone is sold me. Yes,
it's an American journalist. He's bloody good. Oh God, I've forgotten his name, but it's the same name as a famous Hollywood producer who died recently. Robert
De Niro.
Robert Evans. Robert Evans is a famous 70s Hollywood producer. But this young guy, like he's a millennial, Robert Evans is a journalist. And what he does is researches famous bastards or not so famous bastards, but tells you stuff that you don't necessarily know about them. And he gets a comedian on as a guest to riff off the stuff he's saying. Right. And he's done the big ones like Hitler and Stalin and Saddam Hussein and whatnot. But he finds out weird ones, but it's absolutely beautiful. And one of the things he's highlighted multiple times is these fucking right-wingers, they're horrible, horrible people. And they will initially form a coalition, but there's usually a very short time until they can't stand each other and they just turn on one another.
Yeah.
And look, I know we talk about, oh, geez, the left's going to eat itself and the gatekeepers on the left are too much. But But Jesus, the people on the right, it's because they're just so fucking awful. They get to the point where they can't stand each other.
Yeah, well, exactly. Well, my favorite. Well, no, my favorite is cognitive dissonance. Was the Flat Earth Society has members all around the globe. Was genius. Or possibly the one where the American Nazi Party put out a thing about using like correct spelling and stuff. If you're going to have the message out there, and someone responded, "Literal grammar Nazis."
Yes.
That was nice. But the one of Tommy Lauren when she said there was there was a coalition of nationalists around the world. What are you talking about? They're nationalists, you idiot.
National coalition standing against the globalists. And it's like, what?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, nonsense. Absolute fucking nonsense. Well, that's how you can tell that white nationalism is. I suppose it would work to a degree in Australia, but certainly in America, it's an American concept. Because I assure you, the white peoples of Europe do not see themselves as one united group, as the internecine bloodletting of the last 2, 3, 4,000 years in this continent will have shown you.
Yeah, I tell you, the weirdest one I've had is like, because I used to like post university watching a lot of art house films, and there was this one in the 90s that was basically the story of how much the Swedes and the Danes hated each other. And I was like, how the fuck do you even tell each other apart?
Exactly.
How can
they've got a slightly different type of blonde hair and blue eyes.
Yeah,
that's the difference. Yeah.
is
there a single country in Europe, which is, I mean, they're all predominantly white, that hasn't had at least one massive civil war and slaughtered one another?
My God, it's wild. And yeah, the concept of a white person, it's virtually a 20th century invention, maybe a 19th century invention, because the different, quote unquote, white races fucking hated each other.
Yeah. Oh, absolutely. Well, if you look at the way in which Italians were treated in America, or the Irish were treated in America, those would be considered white by the white nationalists. They were not considered white by the WASPs of North America.
Yeah, one of my favorite podcasts is by the Irish comedian Blind Boy Boat Club from the Rubber Bandits. I don't know if you're familiar with them at all.
No.
Really good. He's just a lovely bloke. Like, the Rubber Bandits are a very funny musical comedy group, most famous for a song called Horse Outside. It's set at a wedding, and he's picking up a bridesmaid, and essentially the story in the song is she says, "Why should I go with you? Mitzi, Fitzy's got a Mitzi, like as a Mitsubishi, and all these guys have got hot cars. Why should I go with you?" And he says, "Fuck your Mitsubishi, I have a horse outside." And he's basically, because I ride a horse, which is better than any, and it's a completely nonsensical song. But he's just an incredibly smart guy. He's got a couple of degrees. I think he did a lot of history and art at university. And the Blind Boy podcast is absolutely fascinating because he does all these hot takes and has stream of consciousness stuff. But he often talks about how particularly American people of Irish descent have really bigoted ideas. And he's going, what the fuck is wrong with you? Until the early 20th century, you were as hated as black people. And then you took on these really punitive roles as like being cops and enforcers, and you earned your whiteness by being complete bastards. And he's going, and it's really fucked up. The Irish have more in common with oppressed people around the world than they do with the ruling class. So why the fuck are you so eager to oppress non-white people when you have historically been so badly treated?
Well, because like you say, that's the way they earn their ticket to not being oppressed, I suppose. They've thought, fuck it. If they want us to do the oppressing and it means we don't get oppressed, we'll do that, I suppose, is the way it was looked at or whatever. But yeah, if there is one group of white people who probably could be considered to be oppressed, it would probably be the Irish, I suppose.
And you do, and the other thing Blind Boy always talks about is points out how people essentially push the lie of Irish slaves, and they weren't so much slaves as indentured servants, which is still evil and fucked up. But when you worked as an indentured servant, it was for a fixed period of years, and then you had your freedom, and your children weren't born into slavery. Whereas chattel slaves, the American slaves, the West Indian slaves, the Caribbean slaves, they were owned, they were property, and their children were also property. And it just wasn't the same thing at all.
Yeah, and you could literally rip the baby out of the mother's arms and sell it.
Yeah.
You could split up family, a wife and husband could be split up and sold and never see each other ever again. The indentured servants, like you say, fucked up, evil, disgusting practice.
Yes.
But you weren't literally owned in anywhere near the way. To compare it to chattel slavery is just a disgusting abuse of history.
Yeah.
And a betrayal of both groups who were both oppressed, but in very different ways.
Yeah. And if someone like who is of Irish descent wants to acknowledge the truth of how fucked indentured servitude was, I'm 100% on their side. But to compare it to being the same as chattel slavery is just not true.
And they weren't indentured servants because of their race either.
No, it's because they literally owed a debt to someone.
Yeah. And often
often fucked.
Yeah, oh no, it's absolutely fucked. And often it would be in payment for the ship ride over there. They wanted to emigrate. They couldn't afford the boat journey, so you signed a piece of paper saying you'll work for X number of years. It's disgusting and clearly exploitative in in one of the most despicable ways you can think of. But it's essentially it's not the same as being owned and transported thousands of miles and having your children stolen from you. I mean, you could murder a slave. You couldn't murder an indentured servant and not potentially face legal ramifications.
Yes.
I'm not saying the justice system was like perfect or whatever, but the indentured servant was a human being. The slave was not considered to be a human being.
Yeah. Whereas killing a slave was just a bad idea because they had a commercial value to you. And if you killed them, you lost that commercial value.
Yeah, exactly, but it was considered to be essentially damaging your own private property.
Yeah. It was just a bad idea from the point of view of it was costing you money.
Well, they used to have this is grim as fuck, and I'll replace the epithet with the N word.
Yes.
They had a thing called lighting an N-word's arse, which was a practice where they, in order to punish a slave who dared to go against the gangman in the Caribbean, they would fill the anus of said slave with gunpowder and then flick matches at him.
What the fuck? Jesus.
And essentially blow him up. Arse first.
Damn it. God, I've not heard that one. That's fucking Jesus. What the hell?
Yeah, that is grim. That is fucking grim, isn't it?
Grim.
So, indentured servants not treated well. They did not have gunpowder, arse explosion deaths and murders. Do you know what I mean?
This is something we could maybe talk about on another audio. I want to start talking about now because it's popped into my head. Have you seen any of the 70s blaxploitation slave films like Mandingo or Drum?
I have not. I've seen some blaxploitation, but not about
slavery. I have.
Okay.
Oh no, there's the blaxploitation films like there's the horror ones like Blackula. There's the crime ones like Shaft and whatnot.
Yeah.
But there are the slave ones, which are really heavily sexualized. The two big...
For God's sake.
Oh no, dude, they are so messed up. I've seen the two big ones. The two big ones are called Mandingo and Drum. And they are...
Well, don't say it's been over-sexualized, then talk about two big ones. That's ridiculous.
No. That's what it's all about. It's about the big ones. And the slaves having it with the white ladies on the plantations and... Oh my God.
Well, actually, it was often the reverse of that, where white men would impregnate black women.
Oh, yeah, that was the default. Like, famously, the US President Jefferson.
Apparently so, yeah.
Has an enormous number of black descendants because he was raping his slaves.
Yeah.
One in
Oh yeah, I should point out, I'm not suggesting this was like anything like consensual. When you're a slave, you don't really have a
it's not
choice.
consensual when you own the person.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. When I say impregnate, that sounds like that might have been like just it was lovely. It was the creation of new life. No, it was the rape of people. Yeah.
What
Anyway,
it's Sally Hemings. She was the one that we know the name of. Sally Hemings was famously Jefferson's slave who he raped, and there are a lot of people who can prove through DNA
yeah.
that they are direct descendants of Thomas Jefferson, and they're black. And it's just like, and it's not that there was mixed race further down the line. It's like, no, they're the descendants of Sally Hemings.
Yeah, exactly. When you've got the two descendants there, and that was the meeting point. That's how they met.
Yep. And that's the other thing. The number of the founding fathers who were fucking slave owners was just.
Well, that's talking of cognitive dissonance, as we were earlier. The idea of writing something as beautiful as "all men are created equal" whilst owning slaves.
Yeah.
I don't. How do you possibly square that in your own mind?
But
Ridiculous.
even white men, they actually only meant white men with property.
Yeah,
White men who didn't own anything didn't have voting rights.
indeed.
It was only propertied white men who had. It was fucking insane. The cognitive dissonance, as you say.
Yeah, madness. But the land of the free,
Oh
the largest prison population in the history of mankind.
my god!
Again, cognitive dissonance up the arse. Ridiculous.
America is cognitive dissonance in the form of a country. It's just
yeah, absolutely. But there we go.
The absolutely contradictory things they have to hold in their head at the same time.
Oh god, I don't know if you're aware of a guy called Jacob Wall. He's one of my favourite lolcows. But I tell you who's fast becoming my second favourite lolcow.
Yep.
That would be Charlie Wall, Jacob's father, who is fucking mental.
Oh wow.
Yeah. He is a conservative dude who did. He's so strange. I'll get onto the point. I'm bringing him up in just a second because I had interacted sort of with him. He did a softcore porn calendar for charity, for an injured veterans charity, when he's a conservative Christian dude. All of a sudden, Jacob Wall's nonsense begins to make sense when you actually visit this dude's world. Very strange chap. Anyway, he said the dumbest thing I think I've ever seen from a pro-gun American yesterday in connection with the horrific event on London Bridge. Terrorist attack. 2 innocent people died and the one very guilty person died. A horrific event. But he went on about how brazen the terrorists are when they know the population aren't armed. And I had to say, I just responded to him with, America, notorious for its complete lack of gun violence.
Yeah.
Because the population are armed, therefore no one ever attacks anyone ever. Like, motherfucker, 2 people died in that terrorist, well, two innocent people died in that terrorist attack. That wouldn't make the news in America.
No, it literally wouldn't.
Yeah, because, I mean, imagine this. There are occasions where a person will take a gun into a school, shoot dead children, and it doesn't make the 10 o'clock news bulletin for the nation. Because it happened. If they did, there'd be nothing else on the fucking news in America. And yet they have the temerity to say that we've got it wrong. No, actually, I think yesterday proved rather conclusively we have a pretty decent handle on the situation.
How funny, but it was an awful thing. But how funny, because it happened near the fish markets, how funny was the image of the guy who'd taken down the narwhal tusk that was an ornament?
Yeah. He literally took a fucking a big was it a narwhal or a fucking whale tusk or something?
No, it was not. Well, a narwhal is a type of. It's the whale, like the unicorn whale.
Yeah,
the whale that has that tusk coming out of its head, and it was a display in the fishmongers in the fish market, and because the attack happened in there and outside there, and the guys just pulled this down from the fucking display. and he's pinning this terrorist with a fucking narwhal tusk. That's crazy.
Imagine telling that story. Imagine, did I ever tell you the time I pinned down a terrorist with a narwhal spike? And they're going, all right, Dave, shut the fuck up. He's Dave reckons he pinned down a terrorist with a narwhal tusk. Yeah, of course you did. and yet, as weird a sentence as that is, that actually happened to a human being yesterday.
Yeah. And apparently the prick who did the attack, I mean, he murdered a couple of people by stabbing them, but he had what turned out to be a fake bomb vest on, which was intended to stop people from stopping him. But a couple of people just went, fuck it, and went for him, even though they didn't know it was fake. And that's why the cops shot him dead, because they didn't know the vest was fake.
Exactly, yeah. That's, if you see a person with a suicide vest, you shoot the fucker dead. I mean, there's no like, can I tell whether this is real? No, you shoot the cunt. Yeah. And there's a very easy way of not being shot in that situation, because I've managed it my entire life. Don't walk around with a fake bomb vest on.
The cops had to pry one dude off.
Yeah, they had to rip him off him.
The fuck out of the cop. They pried this guy off, and then the fuckhead did something like, oh, I'm going to do the vest. And it was like, okay, bang, bang, bang.
Yeah.
But seriously, to go down in history as the guy who attacked a terrorist with a narwhal tusk is...
Well, yeah, that is genius, but we'll have to wait and see in the great pantheon of terrorist takedowns where that lies. But my favorite one up until then, I suppose, was the baggage handler at Glasgow Airport. The 7/7 bombings happened. It was awful. But one that didn't happen because for whatever reason he'd bottled it and then drove from London to Glasgow and decided to try and ram the terminal. With the thing. So the car exploded and the guy was on fire and he got out and the baggage handler kicked him in the bollocks.
Yeah.
Genius. Love it. It's so Glasgow. You see a man on fire and you kick him in the balls. And he deserved it. It was a brilliant response and quite rightly was hailed a national hero. But it's so Glasgow.
Oh, absolutely. And that one was so fucking weird. That really pins down the thing about a certain type of person who gets sucked into the terrorist mentality, because that was, and these were people, they were like doctors. These were educated people.
Yeah, one of them was a teacher. Yeah,
they had decided,
like a primary school, like young child teacher.
Yeah, man. They had decided they were willing to die, but apparently they weren't willing to do the basic amount of research into explosives. Yeah, because they just filled their car with like 44-gallon drums with petrol and drove it into some fucking stanchions which stopped them. And
but they couldn't have driven into it anyway because it was a revolving door. So the car was obviously going to crash and not enter the building. So the only person that ended up dying was the dude who did the thing.
Yeah, because they believed Hollywood movies or something, that if they crashed the car, it would explode into a huge explosion. And it didn't. The petrol just spilled and caught on fire. And
set them on fire.
Covered in burning petrol and so burnt to death. What a fucking idiot.
Yeah. Still my favourite, the one that... have you seen the film Four Lions?
I love Four Lions.
It's an amazing film. Well, Chris Morris, the director of that film, when he was like doing the press junkets, tells an amazing story, which is genuinely true, of his favourite idiot, because he was explaining why making fun of the terrorists isn't trying to humanise them. It's showing that they're actually just idiots, but they're dangerous idiots, right? And one story he told was of off the coast of Saudi Arabia, these terrorists were going to try and blow up like a US Navy ship by putting bombs onto like a rubber motorized small vessel thing, like not a rubber dinghy, but like one of those little fucking paddle things, motorized, and have it float off to the ship and then remotely detonate it and blow the ship up, right? Except they hadn't worked out that the weight of the bombs was too much for the vehicle, so they put it out into the water and it just sank. And their entire plan was rumbled and they were arrested and all the rest of it. And I just love imagine the fucking, because we've all been in those situations where something fucks up and you're doing the kind of, oh, Dave, I told you it wouldn't fucking work, and that thing must have happened, but about a terrorist attack. I told you the explosives were too fucking big, Abdul, you twat. Like that conversation must have happened, and I love the nonsense of it. And as you said, he came up with a great phrase. He said, all of life is cutting through a thicket of your own idiocy, and it's no different for terrorists.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look,
true.
If you haven't seen it, Four Lions is a great
Four Lions is amazing.
If you can believe
amazing
comedy about terrorism, and it doesn't shy away from the ugly, horrible, terrible side of terrorism.
Yeah.
But it's still just this wild black comedy.
Yeah.
Riz Ahmed's in it. He's a great actor.
Riz Ahmed is fucking superb, yeah. And he's going to play like other non-terrorist roles and stuff.
Yes.
He's quite rightly gotten a lot of success. Yeah.
He's probably the most sympathetic character in the group, and that makes it all the more chilling that you have some kind of sympathy for him, even though he's a fucking murderous terrorist.
Well, yeah, exactly. Because I mean, again, he shows the idiocy, but you see one of the most touching scenes in that film is when he's explaining using the metaphor of the Lion King and the Simba and his dad to his young son, but essentially explaining why he's doing terrorism to his young son, but using the metaphor of Lion King because his kid likes the Lion King because it's a Western country, right?
Yeah.
So Disney films are everywhere, and it's really touching because you see the dichotomy within him that he knows what he's doing is sort of wrong. But yeah, he has these really strong feelings towards doing something, some terrorist thing. And it's an amazing insight into the tenderness of the fact that he doesn't he obviously loves his son enormously and he loves his wife and actually treats her in a much more progressive way than you would imagine. But you see that a lot in terrorists. The 9/11 attackers, one of them went to a fucking strip club and got drunk the night before. I don't think Allah's okay with that. I've looked at it. They don't tend to be really high on the strip clubs and drinking bit. But, So, it's very strange. But it's a fucking superb film. Very funny, very touching, and horrifically shocking as well.
Yes, yeah. They don't shy away from just the awful implications of being a terrorist. But then you find, like, Riz Ahmed's character is the only one who's not thick as shit. The rest
even then he's sort of thick and wants to play Rambo as well. Like you see in the spoilers, fuck it. The bit where he tries to blow up the
when they go to
drone.
Where is it? It's not Pakistan. They're
Afghanistan.
They're in Afghanistan. Yeah.
That conversation, I remember crying with laughter in the cinema watching it. The bit where they're in the thing and he's talking about the chickens. And he says, it's not a chicken. He just can't get it through to his head. They're fucking chickens, man. Fuck you, chicken. Just brilliant. It's so funny. Oh. And it's got nothing to do with the terrorism element of it, just the stupidity.
But if you never believed you could laugh at a film about terrorism, go and watch Four Lions because it's absolutely amazing.
And not just that, but they make, again, it's a really strange thing because you almost feel there's something within the character at the end. His friends are all been blown up, so he goes and walks into the Boots, which is like a pharmacy store, and blows himself up. But even that's sort of tender because he refers back to a conversation they have earlier where one of them says, "I want to blow up a Boots because they sell fragrances that make you want to fuck white women or something." So even then, the fact that he goes and blows up these innocent people is still sort of touching because he's doing it sort of to honor his dead friend, which is so fucking weird and unsettling. Oh, God.
Yeah, the film really, really challenges you, basically.
Which is why all the gammon were fucking up in arms about it. Because anything that's not just terrorists are all evil Hitler, and that's it, is like, so... Like you can't have any level of nuance or introspection or anything. There's no you just has to be terrorists are all evil and there's nothing else to it. They can't just be have any normal element to them whatsoever, which obviously isn't reality.
Yeah, you know what you just made me think of? I haven't watched it, but I've seen the ads for it. The Amazon Prime series Jack Ryan, the
Oh, yeah, John Krasinski pretending that
yeah,
Venezuela's got nuclear bombs.
Venezuela's the worst thing in the world. It's just like
What, they literally talking about a nuclear Venezuela? What on earth are you doing?
it's, it's just wild. Just like, why are you saying Venezuela is the most dangerous thing in the world? What the fuck? What the fuck is wrong with you?
It's a neocon wet dream
It
series,
is
apparently.
propaganda. It's so weird.
Yeah, it is. It's very peculiar. Yeah,
I'm gonna watch it at some point because it like might be well made propaganda. I'm just fascinated.
well, it's clearly got they've clearly got money behind it because they've got
Yeah.
actors that you've heard of.
Yeah. I'm fascinated almost like from an anthropological point of view. Like, what the fuck is going on here?
Well, it's very strange. Someone said in relation to some of the worship of Trump on places like Fox News, like
Yeah.
Rick Perry said that he was chosen by God, and
Ugh.
one of the random blonde women they have that are basically interchangeable on Fox News. They one of them said something along the lines of he's almost like a superhuman or something, some weird shit. And someone said, the Juche is the name of the thing in North Korea, like the hero socialist leader worship in North Korea, right?
Yeah.
Just to explain that. And someone said that essentially MAGA is Juche for white Americans.
Oh
And
yeah.
it's basically true. It's the glorious dear leader is perfect, even
Yeah.
though he's clearly flawed as fuck.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I did see a good article the other day where someone's looking at. They were using very fucking academic terms about epistemology. I'm saying that wrong, but they were essentially saying why it's like why do poor white people love Trump when Trump clearly holds them in contempt? It's like, well, they just see the sort of people who hate Trump, they are convinced hate them as well, and to an extent they're correct, and they just go, therefore, anyone who hates Trump hates me. Therefore, the more they hate Trump, the more I love Trump, and I will ignore all evidence that tells me Trump is an awful, terrible, shitty person who holds me personally in contempt simply because it's a tribal thing. I feel a connection to Trump. Anyone who hates Trump hates me. So everything Trump does is fine.
Well, it is literally it. I mean, you've just a slightly wordier explanation of doing X to own the libs is the basic gist of it. And actually, Milo Yiannopoulos perfectly summed it up years ago because he's an evil piece of shit, but clearly knows knew his business. He's obviously fallen from grace rather hilariously. But he literally described his support for Trump. He said, Trump pisses off all the right people.
Yep.
And that's literally it. Trump annoys the people they dislike. So that's it. That's all they care about.
No, I'll also give ground. Like some people say, can you say something good about Trump? And I go, well, he completely eviscerated the Republican Party establishment. They threw everything they had at him and he fucked them. And that's no small accomplishment, quite honestly. I mean, forget the Democrats and left-wing people hating him. The Republican establishment hated him and threw everything they had at him, and they failed.
Yeah. Well, I mean, partly because they weren't doing conservatism as Americans understood it very well. George W. Bush doubled the national debt.
Yeah.
Like, the conservatives aren't going to respond well to that.
Yeah, it's kind of like Trump told the right lies, like Bush 1 and 2 told the wrong lies, and Trump told the right lies.
I see what you mean, yeah. I suppose George W. Bush got away with it, A, because he stole the first election, and then B, had what was at the time a popular war, which became a very unpopular war to have him in the second. Yes. And was fighting against a guy who wasn't... It's clearly a principled man in many respects, John Kerry, but is also politically naive as fuck. So that didn't help. But yeah, and Trump. Let's be honest. Trump won because Trump won partly because the media love focusing on Trump, and that kind of free airtime is priceless. And Hillary Clinton was sort of hold below the waterline because of 30 plus years of Hillary Clinton's evil, even though her husband cheated on her. Why is that against her exactly? I don't know. But.
Yeah. Also, I think she kind of blundered somewhat in a lot of her campaign. It was her right to win the election, and she spent more time raising funds with wealthy people than connecting with voters.
Someone pointed out that Wisconsin, a state she lost, she never visited.
Yeah. Even Obama actually pointed out, I won by spending time on the ground, and Clinton simply didn't do that. Like, she took it for granted she was going to beat Trump. And
not just that, but she ran a campaign entirely on "I'm not Donald Trump." Now that works to a degree, but that's sort of going to work with people who are already not going to vote for Donald Trump. They might not necessarily vote for you, but they're not going to vote for Donald Trump. So you're not winning anyone over there. Whereas, even if it's lies, go to those places and tell those people lies, and they'll go, you know what? I'll give her a chance.
Yes.
Rather than just expecting, like you say, almost like a procession, like a royal handover of power or something.
Yes,
that's not going to happen.
That was one thing that I think worked against her. That I think she was treating it as a royal handover of power,
which you never can do. I mean, the electorates don't like that sort of thing.
No. And look, everything that got Trump elected was a complete fucking lie.
Yeah, exactly. I don't want to just shit on Hillary Clinton, although that's can be fun in and of itself. Donald Trump lied a lot to some very vulnerable people.
I'm seriously, I feel like sitting up all night, talk to you, but I'm going to go to bed. I also just want to say hi. Some of my regulars, Fox of Fate and Stella Morris, are chatting in the chat. So hi to you. But Kev, do you know, do you ever listen to Chapo Trap House?
I do, yes. They're very good.
Have you seen, they actually did a live thing. There's video of it on YouTube of election night, the night Trump won. Have you ever seen that?
Oh, is that the one, the clip where everyone, or the faux outrage from the right wingers about someone, he did a joke about go out and kill everyone you know or something because he was so depressed.
Well, basically, there's a couple of hours this because they were doing a live thing. And they, like everyone else, expected Clinton to win, but they fucking hated Clinton. But Trump was just so awful, they hadn't conceived of Trump winning. And the shock that registers with them when it becomes apparent that Trump is winning is fucking... And they've got nothing prepared because they assumed Clinton was going to win. So they had an hour or two's worth of material to shit on Clinton, but then Clinton's losing and Trump's winning, and they're shell-shocked. They're absolutely shell-shocked, and they just don't know what to do. They're like, how the fuck is this happening? What is happening?
I think a lot of Americans like that.
Yeah. But it's really interesting to see because, Chapo, they're like, they're shit talkers. They're the dirtbag left. And when all their expectations are blowing up in their face, they're just like, oh my God, what the fuck is happening?
Sure, but we could be in for another one of those because if Biden gets elected, Biden gets the nomination.
I still think the most likely outcome is Trump winning the next election. But
just look at the numbers. Incumbency is a bastard to overcome.
Yeah.
Really
but Biden's terrible. Biden's like the worst fucking possible choice to run against. He's terrible. And I'd been in the Warren camp for ages because there was just stuff about Bernie that I wasn't quite on board with. But as time goes by, I'm going, I think the Bernie supporters are right that Warren is really a corporatist and I'm actually starting to swing towards Sanders as like, ugh. I'm really starting to have doubts about Warren.
Well, me and George Soros and the Jewish Illuminati support Comrade Bernie.
All right.
He's going to institute the white genocides.
All right. I'm there. If Soros Illuminati are Sanders, then I'm Sanders. White genocide, ahoy!
That won't be taken out of context at all.
Fuck it, man! If someone takes that bit of video and circulates it on the internet, I'm okay with that. White genocide, ahoy! Put it on a T-shirt. Put it on a T-shirt. Have a gay Muslim pirate holding his cutlass overhead, screaming white. No, a lesbian Muslim pirate, holding her cutlass overhead, screaming white genocide ahoy. I'm doing it. I'm putting that on. I'm gonna get one of my graphics friends to design that. I'm selling that T-shirt,
and I'm buying that T-shirt.
I'm buying that T-shirt. This is it. This is how we're going to make millions with white genocide T-shirts.
Yeah, and white genocide.
And white genocide generally. I think there's a lot of money in white.
Well, there's a lot of white people who got a lot of money, and if they're dead, we can take their money. So,
yeah, just fucking.
And apparently, all you have to do the white genocide is just put black people in films.
It specifically in Star Wars, I think.
Yeah, Star Wars. Yeah.
If you put non-white people in Star Wars movies, white genocide is achieved.
Yeah, which is a lot easier. I mean, all these people from history, like Hitler did the Holocaust and stuff, that's a lot more effort than just putting a black person in a film.
I know. Really? They took the long road.
Exactly. You didn't. Exactly. Are you working hard or you're working smart?
Oh my God. That's our slogan. That's our slogan for the white genocide. Don't work hard at the white genocide. Work smart at the white genocide.
Exactly.
Oh my God, we're getting fucking cancelled for this. But anyway.
Oh yeah, I mean, if your channel is still around when I wake up later, YouTube has failed.
I held you personally responsible.
Exactly, your channel's been around forever. It's survived attacked by Nazis. Kevin Logan comes on and advocates white genocide. Poof, gone, dead.
It's just it is fully your fault. I'm just noticing Fox of Fate and Stella talking about fucking booze and green apple. I have lots of green booze. It's not green apple, because the rock candy was all green colored. But I've been drinking green booze all night, and
go the fuck to bed.
I absolutely need to go the fuck to bed.
Yeah.
But this has been enormous fun. We'll have to do it again soon.
Absolutely.
All right. Take care of yourself, man, and take care of yourself. Anyone who's watching us live, watching this back later, you're all freaking awesome. We love you. We'll see you another time. Bye.
Bye.
I've clicked the end broadcast.